Gracious Heavenly Father, we just love you and praise you and so thankful for this evening. We're thankful for our great city. We're thankful for your presence here tonight, Lord. We ask you to be with us, to lead us and guide us, to fill our hearts with you. Help us to have understanding and peace among each other. But most importantly, Lord, we just ask that we do the best for our city. We want to keep in mind our citizens and just to move us forward. All this we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
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 Roll call.
Councilman DeGaris.
Here.
Councilwoman Abshir.
Here.
Councilman Tinsley.
Here.
Councilman Johnson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Russian.
Here.
Mayor Pearson.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Disclosure of interest. Any member of the City Council may disclose any possible conflict of interest dealing with either any item on the printed agenda or with any matter discussed at a previous meeting. Before we move forward, City Clerk Pam Kirby informed me that we need to add something here. We need to amend our tentative agenda that was posted and advertised to include a new voting item, which will be item EE for the HERO grant. This grant is due by Friday, March 20th and needs to be voted on tonight. Do I have a motion?
Also move.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, and the agenda is amended to include a new item EE. Okay, let's go on to citizens' input. Each person in the audience may take this opportunity to address the City Council on any matter which is not on the printed agenda. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jim Chrisman, 464 North Main. On behalf of the Iron Mountain Market Group that operates out of the depot this year, we'd like to continue our tradition that was started last year and have an Easter egg hunt over in the park across the way from the depot. This will actually be on the 11th of April. It won't be Easter weekend, it'll be the weekend following. And we'd just like the council's blessing to do that. Thank you.
That event was a success last year. Does anyone have any opposition to that? No? I think you're okay for that. Hello?
Hi, Mayor.
Hello?
Ron Black, 3491 Normandy Road, Poplar Bluff. There is an item about utilities and rates on there. Will the public be able to speak at that time, or should I make my comments now?
It's a workshop item.
Yes,
so,
it is. So I'd have an opportunity at that point. Would that
yes,
be the right time?
Yes, and they're going to make a presentation up here, so if anyone's here for that, I would advise that we go ahead and let her do her presentation, and then anyone who wants to come up and speak and ask questions, then we can do it at that point.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. If nothing else, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes.
Can I say something?
Oh, sure, come on up.
I'm Joan Wessel, and I live on 2609 Barron Road.
Okay.
And I just felt it was necessary for me to come and address the council because of some of the objects I've been reading about in the newspaper in regards to the municipal utilities. Is it true that there is a movement that someone wants to potentially sell the municipal utilities?
Actually, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead. First I've heard of it.
Mr. Massingham, I think it'd be best if you addressed that question, because that way I think the public would, I had you'll understand why I'm asking Mr. Massingham to address that. I think that some people just don't trust anything I say. So what I did is I had a conversation with Mr. Estes on the phone, which was on speakerphone, which Mr. Massingham was present. And Mr. Massingham, would you please address that question, please?
Yeah. Well, I might be getting the cart before the horse. but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, and Speak Out in the newspaper several nights ago, there was a Speak Out, said a city employee had written it that we were trying to sell utilities to Ozark Border. I was in Mr. Kaplan's office Monday afternoon, and he called Stan Estes on the phone, put him on speakerphone, and basically called to apologize to Stan for that being in the newspaper, and Stan reiterated that he had only met Mr. Kaplan once, and that was this past summer when Mr. Kaplan started, and then he said he knew of Dr. Russian, but he had never met Dr. Russian, so he was surprised to see that in the newspaper as much as all of us were. So no, there was no discussion there at the Ozark Border office about selling city utilities.
Thank you. Yeah, because I just want to say to the council members, we consider municipal utilities a feather in our cap. It's a wonderful department. They come immediately when they're called. The staff are so well-trained and so knowledgeable in their field. And I mean, they come night and day, and they're just such a pleasure to deal with. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of residents when I say, and am I not correct, that we love our little municipal utilities? Yes, we do. We're very proud of them. I mean, I think that to have your own municipal utilities is a plus, a real plus. And it reflects really highly on this city because the people are from our own neighborhoods and we really appreciate them greatly. And if the council owes money back from a loan, then we should pay our loan. We should do the right thing. And even if the municipal utility, I know it's a little gem because it's probably worth a lot of money, considerably, and it would garner a lot of money, but we need to have something that is ours and that we have been dependent on for years. I'm not even sure how long the municipal utilities has been in existence, but I would imagine as long as the city is old. I'm not sure, but anyway, I just wanted to speak up because the paper said that Bill Bach or Bill Bosch, I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, Bach, okay, couldn't be present today because he had a scheduled vacation already. And, you know, I thought, oh, someone needs to say how much we love our municipal utilities. And I hope it never goes on the chopping block. And one other little thing. I also read there was a diagram on the front page of the paper, and it showed the ways of spending are controlled compared to Cape Girardeau. Did you all see that? Anyway, it said that there's a proposal. Are you proposing this? Yeah. To change $5,000 to a $25,000. And I mean, when was the last time someone handed you a $25,000 credit card and said, now we want you to do these things? Normally, you have checks and balances. That's what small government is based on. That is the foundation of why you're here. And even if it adds another meeting, another discussion, another check by one of y'all, it's important because that's how spending gets out of control when you just keep seeing money flowing and then coming back. Oh, now we need a little bit more. Checks and balances are small town America, and that's why you were voted in. And that, Mayor, is what we really want to preserve. We want to preserve the notion that you all are watching all the money and you know what's going out of your coffers. And even if it's $5,000, that's a lot of money in this town compared to Cape Girardeau. You know what I'm saying, right? Well, thank you very much. I took up
Thank you
enough
so
time.
much. What is your name? She didn't get it for the record.
Joan Wessel.
Okay.
Thank you for coming up and speaking to us. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Laura Clark, and I live at 2505 Barron Road. I'm a old as dirt, and I've been a hometown person for just about that long. I wanted to say that I've been saddened by the last few months of reading in the paper all the bickering and discord, and it's just very sad for someone who loves her community to, if I were, for example, a business person, a company that wanted to move here, I would read the paper and see that what's the stability in moving into a community in which our leaders have such disparity of viewpoints. And I just, I think this is rather a turning point in our city, and that I just feel it's a matter of grave importance that decisions that are made with not an ego type thing, but say at the end of your life, when you're assessing your life, if our community doesn't turn better for this, what is the part that I have played in this? And that's, I think, a matter between everyone and God. And I don't know all the information. I just know that I'm saddened, and that if I were a new person trying to come here, I would be leery. And I say that in all humility because I don't know a whole lot other than what I read and what I feel. Okay, thank you very much.
Ms.
Thank
Clark,
you.
if I may,
Yes.
I don't know if you remember me. I remember
Sure,
you
Peter.
in school, and
Yes.
and I'm a lifelong citizen here, and I'm as saddened as you are. But what saddens me is you are misinformed. And I'm sorry, you just heard testimony from Mr. Massingham that what was printed there was totally false. And you can't, I'm sorry, it's speak out, but I don't see how they can get a complete pass on writing something that is totally false and not, they're very quick. Miss Angela White wrote a letter to the article. Following the letter to the article was a long, what do you call it, an explanation from the editor about that, what, commenting on what she said. Something like that in Speak Out is totally false, and there's no comment from the editor, there's no research, there's nothing. You're totally misled by what is, the headline yesterday was totally, we haven't even talked about it. What is in the headline is not gonna happen. It's not, it's false information. And I'm sorry, it is sad what you're saying, that our citizens feel that way. But I can tell you this council is working very hard for the betterment of it. And there's a lot of things that have not been reported in the past, and everything is under a microscope right now, and it's just not fair to you. And I don't know how. I share your feelings.
I know the famous saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I would hate to deal with the power that you have on your decision making, and I can only pray for our city and hope that decisions are made not on defending your turf, but in humility. And I thank each of you for serving in a difficult time and a difficult decisions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jim Crescent, 464 North Main. I didn't intend to say anything else tonight, but I can't leave unanswered the question that I'd like to ask these two ladies is, where were they when the city cable was sold some 8 or 9 months ago? It was brought up, it was sold in one night, and we look back on it now, there were a lot of things in that deal that weren't disclosed at the time. And I think that's just absolutely a shame that they would read the outright lies in the Daily American Republic on almost a daily basis and believe that. I've gotten to the point that I don't read it. If I do read the DAR, I pick it up and I read 4 or 5 copies at one time. And I just can't believe what it is, what's there. When's the last time you saw something positive about anybody in the city council in the DAR? I mean, it just doesn't happen. Do you not do anything good? At the time that the cable was sold, I did make a comment, and I thought it was half joke and half serious. But I mentioned at the time that to some friends, said, well, you know, if we sell a cable company, why don't we sell the rest of it? You know, why does the city need to be in that business? I don't think that's where this got started, but you know, I don't want you to keep a closed mind on that possibility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can a person speak again?
Sure.
Why, of course.
Oh, thank you.
We're gonna be here a while. We're gonna be here a while.
First of all, I have no ill will against any of the council, Mr. Kaplan, any of you. I just read what is printed, like, on the front page and things, and, you know, it is something that the public has to digest and understand, and, you know, we don't want to be undersold as an ignorant mass of people in Poplar Bluff. That's far from the truth. And I think, you know, sitting before me are some very talented people. And we just want to speak up. I know I don't like that phrase very well now because it sounds like speak out, but we just want to be heard. And the only way to do that is to come before you. And like I said, I know there's a lot of dissension, but I really do want to see the council and the paper get along, because the paper is our way of communicating the news. And, you know, Mr. Kaplan, I hope and pray that you can, you know, at least see the good in the newspaper and try, just have another meeting, like let them interview you and ask you anything. I mean, it would be, and put it on the front page, and, you know, let us know really what you're thinking and, you know, your opinion, you know.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
I want to say this with great humility and with restraint. I'd be happy to do that, and the invitation goes directly to Don Schreiber. Anytime he would like to meet with me, I'd be happy to talk with him. I just wish that whatever information I'd give to me, he'd actually use. And so all I'm going to say is this: Mr. Schreiber has a right to run the paper in any way, shape, or form that he sees fit, in which he does. Do I believe he uses it for political purposes? I think you guys know the answer to that. I believe he does. There's nothing wrong with what he does. The only part that I take exception to is that he misleads the public. And I'll give you just one example, and then I'm gonna just leave that. I'm gonna leave that open invitation for Mr. Schreiber himself. I want to talk with him. I don't want to talk through his reporters anymore. I want to talk with the man himself that has the problem with me. So here's an example, just one example.
Okay.
If you saw in Sunday's paper, if I believe it was Sunday's paper, it said that the wastewater plans were on hold for our planned renovations of that plant. It was funny because I called Mr. Bach. I said, Mr. Bach, were you aware that our plans were on hold? He said, no, I was going to ask you that very same question. And I'm like, where'd they get that information? Then I started contacting some of the council members, and I asked them, did they maybe misquote you somehow? And they said, no. And so there is a headline, front page headline, it's completely false. And yet, here's the tragedy. The real tragedy of it is the good citizens like yourself read it, and you should take it for the truth, because that's what real journalism is. It's to seek the truth and report it, and not to take a one-side angle to it and try to spin it.
Well,
And
that's
so,
what keep down.
right, and that's why I really applaud your efforts and every citizen that comes and talks to us, because that's the democratic way, is we're not all going to agree, you know? We're not all going to agree with one another. But the key is that we can keep some discourse and talk with one another. I implore, and every citizen of Poplar Bluff, if you have a concern, please come talk to me. If you don't want to talk to me, talk to Mr. Massingham. If you don't want to talk to Mr. Massingham, talk to the Madam Clerk. We're happy to talk. One, we're happy that you're supporting our salaries, one. But two, we serve you. Now, The madam indicated the real power. The real power is not here. The real power is the citizens. You guys can remove any of us anytime you like. I'm an at-will employee. You can get rid of me at any time. You can recall people. You can elect people. You have the power. Don't ever forget that. It's not the paper. It's not me. It's not the council. It's the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
If,
I have one request. If you do have that interview, how about having it on the stage at Three Rivers College so we can all come as the public and hear? the
I would
question?
love it.
Wouldn't that be good?
I would love it.
That would be good.
I've actually offered
Come.
I've actually offered a debate with Mr. Schreiber and a professor of public administration to find out who really has the real answers to true
Well,
city
no, I'd
affairs.
like to just see you both sitting in comfortable chairs and let him interview you.
Sure.
And ask you questions.
Sure.
Because we want to hear from you truly, Mr. Kaplan.
I'd be happy to. If that came from Mr. Schreiber himself, I'd be happy to do it.
one of the comments I'd like to make is, first of all, definitely I want to thank Mrs. Wessel and Mrs. Clark for coming up and speaking. We want the environment at that podium to be inviting and nurturing to our citizens. And so I appreciate you coming and speaking, and we encourage you to do it again. We encourage other people of the public to come and speak to us. Just in one other thing, I probably had about 20 calls in the last 24 hours, which was fine, and I welcomed it. Out of those 20 calls, I probably talked to 12 people. And I enjoyed every conversation. We didn't agree with everything we talked about, but the important thing is we had a dialogue. It let me give them information, it let me hear their ideas, and we need more of that. We need more of it on the phone to us. We need more of it here at this podium. So thank you, ladies, for coming. And if you ever see anybody where we don't have that environment at the podium being inviting and exceptional, then you just call it to our attention because we want it to be. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I think that was very nice, the way you all came and approached us, because it seems like, for whatever reason, we have this adversity going on in our community, and Ms. Clark is so right. It's painful. It's painful for us up here. We're trying so hard to do for you guys, and if you don't think for a second that every single person sitting up here doesn't have you in their heart, you're mistaken. We're here to serve you. You know, I get so frustrated with some of the negativity. I can't even read that newspaper anymore. But I do it sometimes just so I can get an idea of what maybe people have a concern about. Get a little choked up talking about it, but, you know, I want to hear from people. How can I serve you if I don't know what you want? I need to hear what you want us to do. I need direction so that I can vote in a way and I can lead in a way, and I'm sure every single person up here feels the same way. You know, we want to do what you guys need us to do. Bottom line. Anybody else?
No, I got several phone calls too, and I'd like to say everybody that I talked to were very nice, spoke to me what they wanted or what their considerations was, and I really appreciate it. And they can call me anytime they want. In fact, I had so many phone calls last night, the battery on my phone went dead trying to talk to them. But
That's
no,
a good thing.
everybody was nice, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. You know, we've all gotten to talk so much here. Let's start the meeting. Approval of the minutes. The city clerk will present the minutes of the city council meeting held on February 2nd. I actually believe everybody has this in your packets. The items in the consent agenda are approved by a single action of the city council. If any council member would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and considered separately, he or she may so request. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
I second.
Motion is second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the workshop items. Item A, a representative from Utility Financial Solutions LLC will appear before the council to present the results of the electric rate study.
Actually, are we doing the city clerk's report or no? We already did all that.
We approved it.
Okay.
Okay, so we want the,
We just need to.
okay. Just before she gets started, anyone who's watching this, would you please take notes, ask, if you have a question, write it down, and then later after the meeting, or even after the workshop, you could come up and ask us a question, or hold on to it for later and ask us later.
So what you're saying is you don't want her interrupted in her presentation?
What I want is for people to actually write down questions and listen to her presentation, so they have an idea what's
Questions
going
will be
on.
taken
And
after.
we can help answer their
Okay,
questions
okay,
later.
Right.
We have copies of the presentation still sitting on the table for anyone's interested.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Dawn Lund. I'm Vice President of Utility Financial Solutions, and we are a consulting firm. We're an international consulting firm. We provide financial services for utilities across the country. Our firm, we do all the cost of service studies, teaching for APPA, American Public Power Association. I personally do all the financial teaching, all their classes. We're a preferred vendor for hometown connections through APPA as well. We were hired to perform a financial projection and possible rate design for the electric utility. And my goal tonight is I'm going to talk about three main key targets, financial targets that we look at in order to determine the overall financial health of the utility. They're key indicators. I'm going to talk about why they're important, and I'm also going to show a summary of where you are today with those key targets and where you need to move to stay healthy and or meet those targets into the future. I'm going to talk about three main key targets. Those are operating income, and I will describe why each of these are important and what they are. Minimum cash reserves. How much should the utility hold in cash? That's a question asked across the country right now for enterprise funds. How much cash should a utility have? And I'm going to talk about debt coverage ratio. I'm going to start with each target. I'll describe what it is, why it's important, what it's funding, and then I'm going to show you a summary of where the electric department is today and how are you or are you not meeting these targets, and where we need to move into the future. The first one I'd like to talk about is operating income. Operating income is simply a financial measurement after looking at revenues less expenses. You have operating income. And the question becomes, we know that should be something positive. We don't want to be operating in a loss, but how positive should that be? What should that number be? An operating income target is one key target to look at to see if we're meeting that goal. What operating income does is it's just a measurement of an adequate return for the investment in the system today. Are the customers on your system paying for and funding what they should be paying today? Are they funding the expenses of the system? Are they funding the infrastructure usage of the system and future replacement? So that's what we look at. Are the customers today paying what they should be? This target funds two things. When I talk about a return, I'm not talking about 10 to 12% rate of return that investor-owned utilities enjoy. I'm talking about a return more like 5 to 7%, which basically covers two things. One is the interest expense you have out on your debt, and the other is the inflationary increase for system asset replacement. And what do I mean by that? Let's pretend you have a $1 million asset with a 10-year life. I'm going to depreciate $100,000 a year and put that into my revenue requirements, my revenue requirements. And that's how I'm paying for my assets that I'm consuming on the system. But when I go to replace that asset in the future, after the 10-year useful life, that asset's going to cost me $1.3 million or something more. So in my example, the rate of return is trying to recoup that $300,000 in my example. So my operating income target, I'm just trying to recoup my interest expense on debt and my inflationary increase on my assets for system replacement. Again, the average return for a municipal, we like to see between 5 and 7%. And when I go through the methodology unique to your system, that operating income return comes to 5.6%. So we're on the lower end of what we're trying to return for your system. Okay, so that's one financial target. The second financial target that I look at is minimum cash. How much cash does the electric utility hold? How much is a healthy level for the electric utility to hold? And I look at 5 risk areas to the utility: operating expenses, power supply expenses, debt, your future capital into the system. And I look at those areas and I apply a risk factor. And when I go through that methodology, the typical enterprise electric fund, municipal fund, typically should hold between 90 and 100 days of operating cash. Now, bond rating agencies like to see, for higher bond rated utilities, AA, AAA, they like to see 150 days of operating cash at a minimum. So we like that target to be anywhere 90 days plus for operating cash. Okay, and I'm going to show you where you are today compared to these targets and where I think we should be moving into the future in a couple slides. The next target that I want to talk about is debt coverage ratio. You have debt out on the system. There are revenue bonds. When you hold a revenue bond, there are certain covenances in your bond ordinance that you've agreed to meet. Basically, it's just a measurement of, can you afford the debt you have out on the system? Are you cash flowing enough cash from operations on a yearly basis to pay your debt payment? That's what a debt coverage ratio is. Even if you're making your debt payment and if you're not meeting your debt coverage ratio, you're technically in default of your bond. So it's very important to look at this coverage ratio and ensure you're meeting it every year, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit about financial summary. What I did on the next slide is I've taken your prior 6 audited financials, and I've looked at your operating income and I've looked at your cash balances just to kind of give you a picture of where you've been moving the last 6 years. And then I'm going to show you a summary of where you are today compared to the key targets. But I do want to mention, before I pull up the financial targets, you know, I look at other things on your system. Age of your system, how leveraged the system is, how much debt you have out on the system. So there's other healthy key indicators I look at. And in general, those key indicators are healthy. Your system's about 45% depreciated. That tells me you've reinvested in the system and you've kept it reliable. You're trying to keep the reliability up. That's good. That's a good indicator. Another indicator is how leveraged your system is. Have you been borrowing all the time to reinvest, or have you been able to pay for system improvements out of rates? Which that's what you should be doing, cash flowing your normal system improvements. And your system is only a 0.3 debt to equity, which is healthy. We typically see electric utilities across the country in the range of 0.3 to 0.5. And some utilities all the way up to a 0.7. And once we pass that 0.7 mark, we kind of consider that highly leveraged. So other key indicators that I've looked at, the system appears to be reinvested in and not highly leveraged in debt. But I'm going to talk about some of the key indicators, where we've been kind of in the past, where we are today, and where I think we need to move into the future. So this summary here is just taking audited financial statements from 2009 to 2014. This first column is your operating income column. If you remember, that's the first target I talked about. It's basically, are the current ratepayers paying what they should be? Are they funding the expenses? Are they funding the depreciation in the system? Are they funding for future capital improvements? Obviously, we want this number to be something positive. In the next summary, I'm going to show you for your specific utility, the calculation for the operating income should be $1.8 million. And that's only that's a 5.6% rate of return. Again, the average rate of return for a municipal utility is 5 to 7, so we're on the lower end of that. My cash balance here in this column, you can see our operating income was positive, and we've now are projected to have losses. Our cash balance, we started at close to $12 million, and currently today we're at about $3.1 million. So over the 6-year period, we've spent down cash. Let's look at our summary in total. This is taking your projected revenues, your projected expenses, your capital improvement program, and this table is without any rate changes, meaning I haven't put any rate changes in there. And one other thing I want to comment on.
Can you move that over where they can see the percentages of them? There you go. Thank you.
I want to make one other comment. You have something called a power cost adjustment. It's an approved formula that you currently have. And what a power cost adjustment does is it's charged to the customer on a kilowatt hour basis. You have a certain amount of power supply expense that are in your fixed rate schedules. And a power cost adjustment passes through any changes in power supply automatically to the customer on a kilowatt hour basis. You have had that historically in the past, and in 2013, you had a cost of service study done in 2013 and a new rate design, and you zeroed out your PCA. And since that point, you haven't reinstated the formula that you have in place to pass on power supply costs. So the tables that you're going to see are with a 0 PCA projected forward. One of my recommendations is that the PCA is reinstated, and that helps mitigate risks in power supply changes to the electric utility, and it actually helps stabilize and keep rate increases lower because you're passing those power supply change costs on instead of letting them accumulate, and then you have large double-digit increases to make up for them. So this table is without the PCA reinstated. Should the council choose to reinstate the PCA, the rate track I'm going to show you next may change slightly. However, let's just look at your financial situation today. Right here is the operating income we've been talking about. You're projected, without any rate increases or without reinstatement of the PCA, to continue to grow losses. Your projected cash balance at the end of 2015 is projected to be at $1.7 million and go negative after that. Your capital improvement plan is here. I would like to say that I look at what you're reinvesting in the system for your size of utility and what's unique to you, and I look to see if that's reasonable. Do I think this utility is overspending, underspending? It just gives me a guide. So I look at your depreciation expense, and I want you to be reinvesting in the system at the amount you're depreciating. I want you to keep basically your net book value level. So you're not holding back capital improvements and letting the system age. That's what I look at. You depreciate about $1.8 million a year, and you're reinvesting about at that rate except for extraordinary expense in 2019. So you're investing in the system like you should be, and it shows because again, the age of your system is only about 45% depreciated, and that's a real healthy target. This debt coverage ratio, the third target we talked about, you have revenue bonds out on the system. Your debt coverage ratio is mandated at a 1.2 or a 1.25. You can see in 2015 we do meet that debt coverage ratio, but after 2016 we're not meeting that debt coverage ratio. And believe it or not, that's one of the most critical targets because that can have the most long-term consequences. If you're not meeting that target, bond rating agencies look at your past performance, and it can affect your bond rating, and it can affect the interest rate that you can get issuing bonds into the future because you can be considered a higher risk. So let's look at the three key targets together and say, what could I do to stabilize my losses, to turn the cash around, at least start building it in the right direction? And if we wanted to turn the utility around to at least stabilize operating income at about a $1.8 million operating income, that's funding the things we should be funding, you would need an 8.5% overall rate increase for 2015. And these rate increases here, I just want to mention, that's just for informational purposes, saying, we have increased costs in the future. We don't really know quite what they'll be. We may reinstate the PCA. If we do, that rate track will change because some of that cost and power supply changes will be mitigated through that PCA. So this is just a forecast. This rate track could change, and I would like the council to consider updating a forecast like this, either internally, externally, whatever, with your budget process. Basically, you now with this report will have the methodology to see what your operating income should be, to see what your minimum cash balance should be, and how to calculate your debt coverage ratio. So you want to update this with your budget process, and that gives you better information of what you need to be moving toward in the future. But you can see with this rate track, I'm funding my operating income, again, at about 5.6% rate of return to recoup interest expense and my inflationary increase on the asset investment in my system. I'm trying to get to a cash balance of right around $10 million. That's 90 days operating cash. The typical utility, again, the range we like to see is between 90 and 120 days. Bond rating agencies for higher rated utilities like to see 150 days. So this 10 million right here is 90 days. I have you on the lower end for the operating income and the lower end for cash reserves. Your debt coverage ratio, of course, is real healthy here. You're above our minimum that we like to see for fluctuations in sales due to weather, due to economy, due to whatever, is 1.4, and you're above that target. So that target's real healthy. So for informational purposes, these are the three key targets. I look at those three key targets, and that helps me determine a rate track. I'm going to actually move on into my recommendations because I think our time might be more spent answering questions, better spent answering questions. Basically, my recommendations are that you review your financials on a yearly basis with the budget process. You now have the formulas. You now have, what we look at to kind of monitor financial health. You'll be able to do that with your budget process. I'm recommending you reinstate the PCA. Your power supply costs are about 80% of your overall costs. So when you can mitigate the risk, the changes in that, it helps stabilize rates, and it helps avoid those double-digit rate increases from delaying those, passing on that change in power supply cost to your customer. I would recommend considering adopting a cash reserve policy. As I indicated, we would recommend a minimum of $10 million, which is a 90 days operating cash reserve. You're projected to have $1.7 million. That's considered very cash critical. Our immediate need is to try to mitigate that and make sure we aren't dipping definitely any lower than that, but try to turn that trend around. And should the council decide to move forward with a rate design, we can talk about the other recommendations at that time. A bandwidth is a certain way that I look at the rate design. But I think right now what might be best served is to ask if you guys have any questions on the key targets that we've talked about, where the electric utility is today, and where we need to move, possibly need to move into the future.
From what you saw in the analysis that you did, where we had the major drops in revenue, 2011, 2012, you know, how much do you think that was our wholesale rate went up versus our retail rate didn't go anywhere, versus what other expenses led to those drop
Yeah,
off?
that's an excellent question, and I can analyze that. That wasn't part of this particular process, but let me tell you what affects that.
Yes.
And what you can look at to help figure out what caused that. If you take your trial balance from the period of, I think it was between 2009 and 2010, take your trial balance from 2009, your trial balance from 2010, and look at the line items, and you'll be able to see what expenses changed. You'll also want to look at your capital improvement program during that period. How much did you reinvest in the system in capital? You'll also want to look at debt service payments. Did you add debt during that time and now added a large debt service payment, or did your debt service payment change? And you will want to look at any cash inflows or outflows to the electric utility that weren't necessarily electric utility operating related. That will paint a picture for you. What happened? Did our expenses increase? Did our debt increase? Did we spend a lot in capital during that period? What caused that? Thank you for that question. Are there any other questions on the key targets?
This might be simple. Do you have any figures on how much somebody's bill might go up?
Yes,
Just
I
for the
do.
public's knowledge, because you got people watching, and could you state that for?
Yes, I do. I have to grab another report, a rate design report, but I can tell you how much, for example, a residential bill would go up.
Because that's what people are wanting to know.
Okay.
They want to know the numbers.
Yeah, I can, let me grab something real quickly here. Didn't have this rate design report with me because I thought, I knew you weren't taking, or didn't think you were taking action tonight, so I didn't have this handy, but if the council were to approve a rate increase and I were to design the rates at the 8.5% overall revenue increase to the utility, the typical residential customer using about 960 kilowatt hours a month would see a $7.63 increase per month.
Do you have the cost for a business? What it would cost a business?
If a customer were on the commercial non-demand rate, which simply means they're charged a customer charge and hour only rate, and they used, for example, 1,590 kilowatt hours, and I would want to step back a little bit and say, you have rate schedules for rate classes.
Right.
And different customers within those rate classes use a range of kilowatt hours. You might have a residential customer using 750 kilowatt hours. You might have a residential customer using 1,500. So what I'm quoting, that's why I'm quoting you the kilowatt hours with it, okay? So a small commercial customer using 1,590 kilowatt hours, for example, would see a $16.05 increase in their monthly bill.
You said 8.5. What if we would drop that down to 5% or something of that neighborhood? What would that do?
Well, I would have to redesign the rate to look at that. That certainly is an option, and I can provide that rate track for you guys. But a couple of the key targets we have to look at is that cash balance. We have to make sure, we don't want that depleting any more than it has, and that debt coverage ratio. Whatever the council chooses to do, we want to look at all the key targets together. But I can get that information if you'd like me to see what a 5% would do.
But to clarify, the calculation you did at the 8.5
Correct.
is going to meet the targets we want, going to meet the 10 million that we want to have in the cash reserve.
That's an excellent question. It is not going to meet the 10 million. This rate track right here right now, all I'm trying to do is stabilize the losses.
Yes.
Okay? With an 8.5% rate increase, the cash balance is projected at 4.4 million. My target is 10
Yes,
million.
yes.
I still haven't gotten you to the 90-day operating cash level I'd like you to be at. I'm trying to balance this target, and this target, and also the impact to the customers.
So the subsequent increases would help you get to the 10 million?
Slowly, you can see the cash
Yes,
building,
yes.
correct.
Okay.
And of course, what affects that in the future, of course, is the capital program too.
Yes.
And again, just for the measurement that I look at, you're investing about where I would expect you to be. You
Okay.
depreciate about 1.8 million, and you can see on average you spend about 1.8 million, except for a couple extraordinary in the last year.
And the historical numbers that go back from 2011, 10, all the way to 14, those numbers are taken from our accounting numbers.
Those are right from your audited
Yes.
financial statement. You
So
can pull up
that's
your
exactly
right
right.
online
Yes.
and look at them.
In years 2016 to 2019, we have, you gave us a price on what it would be for an average bill for 2015, but the percentage is 3% per year after that. So actually, per year after, we would see a slight increase.
Correct. I mean, if you wanted to just say, just for very simple, quick math, I'm almost having a 9% increase this year. I mean, it's 8.5. And a 3% would be a third of that. So I would take a third of the
Yes.
763, and that might be, what is that, like 250?
Okay.
That's a quick, fast math. It would be affected by about 250 for a 3% rate increase.
So that would be added to the next year?
Correct.
That's right.
That's to the
Mhm,
next
yes.
year.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted to know.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, never mind. I think we got it. We have, I don't know if you're familiar with our cable cell that we had. We have some people, I don't know if you heard tonight, they were wanting possibly talking about returning some money to utilities. In the past, our former city manager, he, I believe, wanted us to take that money and use towards building a new city hall, but now people are drumming up the idea of taking that money and applying some of it towards utilities. If we were to return some of those funds, as people are wanting to do now, maybe $4 to $2 million. I'm, just off the top of my head. Have you looked at that and
Yeah.
how much less would it be if we were to do something like that?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Let's review the key targets again. If I received $2 million in cash, let's just say, it's going to simply make this total go up. That's now going to be 6.4 million. So what I have to look at and balance is, okay, I might have 6.4 million. I'm still under my 90 days operating cash minimum that I would like to achieve. I'm obviously better, working more towards that goal. I still need an 8.5% increase to fund my operating income. The cash balance does not affect that target. That target is a measurement of, these are the expenses I have. This is how much I'm depreciating on the system. This is how much I need for future reinvestment. And if I fully funded $1.9 million, my current customers are paying what they should pay for their service. Anytime I'm under this operating income number, the current ratepayers are not funding what they're consuming. And what happens is, when you delay a rate increase, for example, and not put it through, it compounds. Let's pretend I needed a 3% increase today and I don't put it through. Next year, I'm most likely going to need a 5 or 6. The next year, I'm most likely going to need a 8 to 9. And that's what happens is when you don't look at this on a yearly basis and have small incremental increases, keeping up with your cost changes, that builds. And then you end up with the double-digit increases. You'll have systems, they don't have rate changes for a long time. and then you're looking at double-digit rate increases. That's what you're doing, you're catching up. So what this is doing is saying, all right, I'm trying to have you fund your operating income, what you should be funding. The 1.8 million is close enough to the 1.9, because I'm at 1.892. I'm trying to fund that, and then I'm only giving you inflationary type increases after that. And this is only for informational purposes. That rate track will change if you reinstate the PCA, and the rate track will change, if your costs change accordingly. This is just a forecast. So to go back and answer your question again, of course, it helps the cash fund get closer to my minimum, but it doesn't fully fund operating income, and I would have to still be careful with that debt coverage ratio, because if you look at 2016, I'm way below that, so I still have to be careful of that. If my financials looked like this, and I had $20 million sitting in there, for example, let's just pretend I have a +$20 million sitting in there, this target alone would mandate rate increases, no matter how much cash I had set aside. So that's why these targets, we look at them together. So we'd have to be careful with, am I meeting my debt coverage ratio? And how much do I want to fund of my operating income? In theory, we want to fund the full thing. So the $2 million transfer will help build towards your goal of your cash balance.
And so in reality, the $2 million gets us closest to the cash target, but without a rate increase, we'd actually burn through that.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely, correct. If you just added $2 million, thank you for that question. If you just added $2 million to here and you had 3.7 million, these losses are just going to burn right through that, probably within a year and a half.
But
We'll have to have a larger increase.
Correct.
would it actually, okay, would it take us down from the 8.5? And why not?
She's talking about you have to have the 8.5 just to meet your operating expenses.
I know, but if we're plugging in, okay, if we're plugging in $2 million, why wouldn't it go down?
Because you're not going to meet your operating expenses. All you're doing is putting the cash influx in.
This column here, operating income, is a function of revenues received, which in your case, a $2 million transfer in isn't really revenue. It's not really revenue generated from electric sales. That's the kind of revenue I'm talking about. Then you have expenses. You know, you're paying power supply expenses, all sorts of other expenses. The revenues less your expenses, you have operating income. And that's there to ensure customers are paying what they should be paying. So that's that target. That's this target, which has absolutely nothing to do with cash balances. It's a totally separate target.
We talked about this in the utility board today, and it was quite an education for me. But we did talk about, and she said that she could research those rates. And my proposal was, could we go with a 6% and then reevaluate it next year? One of the things we have done, we've had an evaluation in 2012, and we did an adjustment. And I think we kind of sat back and said, we fixed this problem. And what I believe that we discussed in the utility board today and what we need to do, this needs to be looked at annually, because especially with the fluctuation in power rates and different factors, we need to look at this and make an annual assessment of it. And like she says, these are just projections. But I believe that there are some figures, and this is what we want to hear from Mr. Bach. And I said today, this is not, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody or anything. There's some tremendous losses here, and there's some factors for it. And we need to hear what those factors are, and I believe we can make an educated evaluation. And I'm not convinced that if we went with a 6 point, that it could generate cash, it'd make this picture look better, and then look at it the next year. I'm not sure some of these figures are not going to come back up.
And I can update that and provide that for you. I can change
Yes.
that rate track to 6% and update that for you.
Did we look at any of the power sources in which we're getting power from that? Okay, one comes to mind. We have a power plant, we own a portion of the Plum Point. Did you look at any of the specific power sources?
I did not look at specific power sources. I looked at your power supply in total cost. That's exactly what you're talking about. Power supply is the reason I really highly recommend you reinstate the PCA. The PCA is there for if your power supply costs increase, that increase is automatically passed through on a kilowatt hour basis. It keeps the utility whole. Power supply costs are out of your control. It represents about 80% of your operating expenses. So that should be automatic. It's automatically mitigated when you have a PCA. What happens when utilities don't have PCAs and they may not be looking at their financials on a yearly basis, you have a big change in power supply costs. Let's say your power supply costs change by $4 million in 1 year. The utility, in a sense, eats that in that year, and they may not look at rates for a year or two, and power supply costs increase the next year and the next year, and that's where you see the downward sloping operating income. So I looked at your costs in total, and if you were to reinstate the PCA on a financial point of view for the electric utility, it keeps the utility whole with changes in power supply costs. Right now, you zeroed that out in 2013 and haven't changed that. You do have an established formula that could easily be reinstated, and it's frozen right now at 0.
Well, we did talk today about Plum Point too. I feel like Plum Point might be the reason for this drastic income loss in 2011. But also Plum Point has gone through issues with the EPA and doing retrofitting and things like that. And I think we will see as time passes that we'll get more income from that. And that's what I say, if we evaluate this each year, I believe we will see.
That's what I was concerned about, is
improve.
if there were any
Yes.
problem areas in our power supply, are we overlooking some of, where our power source is coming from? Are we overlooking the expense of some of them?
And the other thing I said was that, and there again, this is not against Bill Bach or any of our city employees or anything, but I believe in times when times get tough, we tighten our belts, and we need to look internally, see if there's not somewhere where we can save some money and run more efficiently, but I believe it.
What percentage of municipalities run PCAs that have power like we have?
Most investor-owned, probably 70 to 80% investor-owned, and probably at least 50 to 60% municipals have PCAs. But it's a moving trend for those that don't have them to implement them. Because again, sometimes you hear, well, if I have a PCA, I'm taking away the ability for the council to have rate adjustments. It takes away, but it really, what it's doing is it's taking away 80% of the risk that's out of your control, so you can concentrate on what's left of the expenses. You can concentrate on those. It just takes that right out of the picture.
So if we did 8.5% and we activated PCAs, did that affect our enactment of 8.5% if we did that, or 6%?
You would have an 8% rate increase in base rates. 8% is 8%. And then your PCA is actually a forward-looking or a future calculated PCA.
Okay.
So you would look at the costs that you are projecting for your future power supply costs and go through that calculation and determine what that should be on a kilowatt hour basis.
Do you have any reason why they took the PCA away, or did you find that out or even look at it?
I don't know.
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Betty and Ed may remember this. We had a lot of constituents that weren't, I remember this. We had a lot of constituents that were not happy whenever they received their bill, and at the end of the bill, it would say it would tell you what extra you owed for that month. And I don't know if it was just because of a billing, the way it was being billed to people, they just didn't appreciate it, but there were a lot of complaints about that, and that's why I believe it was taken. Am I right about that, Ed?
Yeah, pretty close. You know, when they would fluctuate and their bill would go up, they'd say, why is my bill higher this month than it was last month? And we tried to explain it to them, and, you know, 2 months later, it may be lower. We wouldn't get any calls then.
Does
But-
anybody?
and then they looked at the 3 point, whatever it was, I think, at that year, to offset that PCA, to make it a straight bill.
They rolled it in.
Every month. And everybody, I'm like Mr. Johnson, I had, 50 calls, and a lot of them were, didn't want the rate increase. I had people say, I can afford it, it's not gonna be that much more for me, but they're worried about some of our other citizens who have a low fixed income, so some of those people will have to do without, figure out if they gotta pay an extra $20, they may have to figure out what day they're not gonna eat within that next billing period. And I thought that was great, that, the people that could afford it were thinking about the ones that couldn't. And, I agree with them, I don't wanna see a rate increase, I like to have my electric, and if that's what we need to do to keep our municipal rates as low as possibly can, then we'll just have to do it. We've got to pay more for everything else we do nowadays. I hate to see a rate increase, but it's better to have a small rate increase than going to selling the thing, which nobody wants to do, and the rates then be completely out of our control.
What concerns me is when the last time this was brought up, I had several business owners come up to me because the council actually voted to do the increase. And we had several business owners that were just floored by how much their bill went up. So I just sometimes feel like, we pile so much on our business owners, and I wish that we could do something about that, because you've got people that barely use something and then they're still slapped with that huge increase, I don't know that this is the change that we saw last year. I guess you looked at all that.
I did look at that, and I did design the rates, and of course, I have looked at impacts by usage, and I do look at all that, so I can give you an estimate, on different usage patterns. The unique part of this whole process actually is the rate design. I kind of got into this with the utility board. Your large industrial customers can benefit, your high-use customers can benefit from the type of rate structure you have in place if that structure is set up properly. If we get to the point where the council does choose to put a rate increase through, whatever that'll be, I'll go over that in detail. But part of my, part of the art part of implementing the rate increase is to make sure the customer classes are treated as fairly as possible, that the different users within that class, different usage users, are treated as fairly as possible, and I'm sending the correct price signals to your customers, and that's done through the rate design. So your larger industrial customers have a customer charge, a demand charge, and a kilowatt hour charge, and I will make sure that that's designed, those three components are designed to treat them fairly, to treat them fairly. And the council will have all that information if you choose to do a rate increase. I'll go through each rate structure with you in detail.
Now, at the 8.5 you're talking about, I don't know if you even glanced or looked, but on the residential, even with that increase, will be lower than, I think, Ozark border, which is next to us. So even with the increases, I think we're lower on the 8.5 to Ozark, which is a good thing. So we'll just have to, this is all, of course, in discussion, but we'll work our way through this. But I think we have to kind of compare apples to apples on some of this too.
I think that's a good question, or good comment. Bill had looked at kind of a rate comparison with what your current rates are today and what they would be with this increase, and you were definitely right within an appropriate range. I mean, you weren't on the high end, you weren't on the low end. You typically want to be somewhere in the middle, and that's about where you were. Of course, I don't, in my studies, let the surveys influence what I'm telling you for information, but you can use surveys to kind of help guide you to see where you are. But, you know, the costs are what they are, and we're trying to fund your unique system to keep it healthy. But I did see that survey after the study was completed, and you fell well
Yes.
within the middle range. Are there any other questions?
You covered very well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time
If the
tonight.
council doesn't have any more questions, if it's okay, I'd like to go ahead and invite anyone from the public to come up and ask a few.
Sure.
Did anyone want to come up and ask her a question? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Mayor, you mentioned 2 to 4 million, and I could be corrected, but I think actually the asset of that sale was probably about 4.5, perhaps, 4.5, whichever one it was. You mentioned the spread of 2 to 4, and so anyway. But certainly it still seems to me like the city owes the utility that money. And it seems to me like without paying that, what is happening is it's certainly increasing our rates to a higher degree than is necessary. Because you take 4.5 million, put it on that projected revenue side, those figures transfer across, I believe the projected cash balance then would probably.
Just the cash balance would increase, correct?
Mr. Brown,
Wait, oh,
I would like to make a comment. We talked about the.
Well, could I finish my comments, sir?
Let him-
well, it's
Well,
a number, it's a numbers thing.
It has to do with that.
Okay.
We have bought $2.3 million worth of meters for the utility company. So actually, the city is paying back 2.3 already, and we are in discussion to pay another 2 million. So that would be $4.3 million.
Well, even the 2 million would help a lot.
Yes, sir.
We have
Yeah.
already put 2.3 worth of equipment into municipal utilities. That's already been.
I hear you, sir.
Okay, go ahead and finish what
I
you're
accept
saying.
that. It was, whether the 2 million, let's use the 2. Seemed to me like if you put it in projected revenue, then that results, of course, in cash balances.
Well, first of all, the projected revenue, that would only affect 1 year.
Yes.
And we wouldn't put it as revenue from operations. That would be an extraordinary income and below the line, if you want to call it that, below operating income. So really, the way you want to think about it is it just goes into the cash balance column. So that'd be 6.4 million, and we still have the other 2 targets to be concerned about. It's not a true revenue. And even if you wanted to think of it as revenue, it only affects 1 year, and you're still not funding operating income.
If you give me money into my account, I spend out of it every year, I wind up with so much money. If you add 2 million in there, then I've got 2 million more in the end of the year, and the cash balance is what you say. But I wouldn't need to increase that 8.5% that first year.
You wouldn't have
That's
to-
exactly what I have the same question about
Okay,
too.
let's go through this again. Where did that pointer go? Let's go through this again. Okay, there are 3 independent targets from each other. I'm looking at 3 different things. I'm trying to say in one target, the operating income target, right there, am I funding my operating expenses, my depreciation, and my replacement for future capital? Am I paying today what I should be paying for everything that I should be paying? If I'm below the $1.9 million, I'm not funding what I should be funding. Rates are set on revenues from operations. Extraordinary income is below the operating income line, and it's ignored. When you think about line extension fees, you know, some years you have a lot of building and you have high revenue, some years you have low revenue. You can't set rates on that type of revenue. It would jump all around. Interest income, we don't set rates on interest income. 10 years ago, we would have enjoyed a lot of interest income to offset our rates, and today we'd be paying for that because our interest income is so low. We set rates on cash, or excuse me, on sales from utilities. In general, our sales from utilities are the same year to year or grow. Now, weather can affect this, general deflation in economy can affect that, but in general, we want to set rates on revenues we know that are going to be there. So that's what this line represents. That's what this column represents. I'm pretty sure sales from electricity, I'm going to receive those kind of revenues. Now, looking at my expenses, looking at what I need to fund, our customers paying their fair share today. If they're under the 1.9 million, our current ratepayers are being subsidized by our future ratepayers. They're not paying today what they should be paying. We're pushing off and delaying increases into the future, what affects our future ratepayers. That's one target we look at. The cash on hand does not come into this target at all. It's revenues less expenses, okay? Now when we talk about cash on hand, why do I even need cash on hand? Yeah. Okay, so I need cash on hand. We both agree to that. You should have, for your municipal utility, for unique to your situation, you should have 90 days of operating cash. 90 days of operating cash. Okay? 90 days of operating cash for your system is $10 million. You are under 90 days. Right here, let's take the $4.5 million is almost the 10, divide it in half. You're at 45 days operating cash. Just bond rating agencies alone, and you have that out in your system, like that to be at 150 days. This is considered cash critical. You are considered cash critical. And actually, we should be looking at this without the rate increases in there. So you have $1.7 million. You have 20% of what you should have cash on hand to keep the utility safeguarded against all sorts of expenses and all sorts of things that can happen in the electric utility. That's cash critical. If I put $2 million in that column, I'm driving that up to, in this example right here, here's the picture. That's going to say $3.7 million. I'm underfunded, by 60%. I'm underfunded right now in my cash reserves if I put $2 million in that column. If I look at the losses I'm incurring right here, I need to be, which has nothing to do with cash, I need to be funding $1.9 million. That $2 million you're talking about transferring in goes under the operating income line. It's an extraordinary income. It goes in other. It's like a interest expense, interest income, connection fee, sales of scrap equipment, whatever. It goes under that line. We don't take that into consideration for rates. It's not an income used to set rates. It's not an income to the utility. The utility it's getting a cash inflow that they will never get again. It's not part of the utility operations.
But you're looking at the no rate.
Right, because I'm pretending you guys aren't going to put a rate increase through, and I'm just trying to show you.
Well, if we did put the rate increase through.
Okay, if you put the rate increase through, this balance, whoops.
Could this number go down? If
That
we put,
number could go down.
Okay.
No, listen, let me finish my statement, please. No, let me finish my statement. That number could only go down if the council chooses not to fully fund the system. If you don't want your current ratepayers today to pay what they should be paying, that number can go down. That's what you're doing now. That's what you're doing now. If the council chooses, as a council, to have the current ratepayers funding what they should be funding, which is operating income, you need an 8.5% rate increase regardless of what you do with this cash. If you add $2 million of that cash, the current ratepayers still need.
You're still subsidizing.
You're still subsidizing, even if you move $2 million into that column. Now, if the council says, okay, I now have, let's go back to this. Let's say the council says, I now have 3.7 there, which the $2 million would add to, and we still want to have subsidization. Then you would shift the $2 million over and do nothing. But your picture, the $2 million in a year and a half would be spent through, and you would be looking at double-digit increases in the next year and a half. So when I say yes, that increase, this column can be whatever you want it to be. Whatever picture you want to paint here is what this increase can be.
I think that is what several of the people are actually wanting possibly, is to subsidize the first year. Am I correct? So that we can decrease the rate adjustment for the first year. And I think that's what we're trying to get down to.
Now,
But
excuse me.
Subsidize the first year.
But it's exponential. If you do that,
Exactly.
it's exponential. If you do that, it compounds on itself, just like she said a while ago.
I see.
Yeah, let's just pretend you want a 6% this year. And in my example right now, the rate increase is 3%. Then you would have a 6% this year and a 5 or 6% next year to make up for it. However, your decision on what you do for the rate adjustment, whatever you delay today, only compounds, and you don't have a healthy cash balance to fall back on. If you had a healthy cash balance to fall back on, I would say that you could do that in the short term. If you had, a healthy cash balance, sure, you can delay out that rate increase. We do that all the time for utilities across the country. Small incremental increases, but it's because I have cash to back up on. If we don't do that, you can see the rapid decrease in cash.
Can you bring the slide up that shows the losses,
Correct.
the historical?
I think Mr. Black has some other questions.
Okay.
Go ahead and let him speak real
I
quick.
understand the incremental somewhere. I'm not totally lost at it. I'm not sure I'm totally getting it either, but I think I'm coming on board with some. But still, the bottom line is, if I give you $2 million, just comes out of the sky because I'm a nice guy. In this case, it comes from the city, but it's $2 million that goes in there. Whether it's from cost to customers, whether it's from all that scrap and other column, it's still $2 million more that you're not expecting, that says you shouldn't have to raise my rates as much last year.
Okay,
That's simple math.
Well,
It's not math from the point of view of an enterprise fund. You're an enterprise fund. Your revenues from operations should recoup its expenses and its reinvestment. An enterprise fund is not like a personal finance where I'm sitting here going, I pay my house payment or whatever, and somebody gives me $2 million. That's awesome. I've got a huge pot of cash now. I can pay all those things. An enterprise fund, you need to make sure its revenues are covering its expenses. That's the responsibility of an enterprise fund. If an enterprise fund's revenues are not covering its expenses,
So the $2 million is not revenue?
the $2 million is not revenue.
Sure, it's revenue. It goes into the kitty. It goes into the
It's not
deposit.
revenue
Was it
generated
not,
from
Mr.
operations.
Messingham, is it not deposited into the utilities account?
We have a little respect for the consultant you have here.
May I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I follow, ma'am, what you're saying, but what the situation we have, and what I want people to look at, that she touched on this Chiron here for a bit, but this is really what we're looking at. The rate increases we have to have are not totally dependent upon the city paying back the utilities. If you look at 2010, we had a cash on hand of $12,495,000. If you look at 2011 on the loss column, you see $3 million. That's more than $2 million. If you look in the next column, that's $3 million plus, and that's more than $2 million. Those kind of figures knock that $2 million so far into tomorrow we can't even see it anymore. Now, I've never been against giving the utilities back any money. In fact, my first thought was, because they took a charge on losing the building, was to give them 1.5, because it was 1.52 charge. On the calculations I've seen, I'm going to recommend, and I can live with, giving them $2 million. But we want to do that from the standpoint of helping us get to your target of the 10. That's what we want it for. We still have to have some type of rate increase, and even if we have the rate increase, we're going to be marginal beneath on the 8.5 of our counterpart of Ozark border, which is in our community. Now, why these losses occurred, on the calls I've had, which have all been respectful, we've had good dialogue, people have asked me, how did we lose $7 million in 3 years? And I said to them, you know, that can, if, for those who really want to know that, that needs to be pursued and understood. But right now, that's not my biggest concern. The numbers are the numbers. We got to deal with the numbers. So how we got there needs to be looked at, but what are we going to do about where we're at is the most important question. And I think you've taken a very complicated subject and simplified it as best as you could. And I appreciate it, but those revenue losses right there, they need to look at them, 11, 12, and 13, and then 14. We were supposed to have an income increase in 2014 of like $300,000, $286,000. It's not there. We had a loss in 2014. The last time we made profit, or show profit on cash on hand, is 2010. Is that not right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right from your audit.
Yes.
And this, I would like to, going back to that reinstating the PCA, this probably would have been somewhat mitigated had your PCA been in place.
I got you.
It should, you may have seen, I didn't obviously do the numbers, but you may have seen that turnaround there. But the problem is, it was zeroed out, frozen, and not continued.
And there's nothing voted on tonight. There's going to be dialogue and discussion, and I will talk to anybody who wants to call me. I will come to homes and talk to people and family and friends, and we need to have a dialogue with the community, but we're going to have to do something about the situation.
I have to make just one further inquiry.
Yeah.
Okay. The 1.5, how much of that is figures for depreciation? I know they have to be calculated.
1.8 million.
So if you take out the 1.8 million depreciation,
That's on a cash flow basis. Rates are not set on cash flow basis.
no, we're talking about the loss of dollars here, the bottom
That's on a
figure.
cash flow basis.
That's cash. Depreciation is not reflected there.
Depreciation is in that number.
Well, then,
No,
okay.
but when you add back depreciation, that's setting rates on a cash basis, which we do not do. That's a true loss on accrual accounting basis for an
understand.
enterprise fund. It's a true loss.
It is. It's not a cash loss if depreciation's in.
You're not funding what you should be funding. That number, the only thing that happened because of depreciation is this didn't drop farther.
That's the most uninformed thing I've heard today.
Okay.
Because guys, I'm gonna tell you, no, this needs to be said. Enterprise funds, folks, there is no, you don't just, oh, wow, do we fund depreciation? No, you have to. GASB stands, Government Accounting Standards Board demands it. We don't have a choice. You have to put it in there. And so I'm sorry that Mr. Black, I'll talk with him more if you need to talk more about the topic, but he's flat wrong. You have to factor in depreciation. On the governmental side, that's different. Enterprise, we have no choice.
I understand you have to factor it in. We're still talking about dollars at the bottom of the end of the year.
I'll keep your girl counsel, I know.
Were some of the tremendous million-dollar decreases in 2011 and 2012, were they after those big ice storms where they had to rebuild a lot of structure?
The only way to go back and look at what caused that was to compare your trial balance in those years, compare your trial balance, look at the capital improvement plan, and look at any debt payments. So I don't know what caused that. That wasn't part of this analysis.
Because it looks unusual. I just thought
But
maybe
you
it
can
was
go back
some
and look at
building
what
that
would
was
cause
going
that.
on.
I was wondering if, Ed, you were on the Municipal Utilities Board at that time. Do you have any recollection as to what might have brought that about?
No, I'd just be making a guess. You know, us not wanting to raise rates, or, you know, the council and the city, you know, for the benefit of the citizens, and then you spend out of that cash to pay for the power that you're getting, then that starts depleting it down. And if I understand what she's saying right, you know, for me, if we gotta pay $10,000 for the power and we're only collecting $8, we're gonna go in the hole.
Correct.
How
That's
does
what
it
the
jump
PCA.
$4 million in 1 year? That's $4 million.
Do you remember if the power price went
I
up?
don't remember what year the ice storm was, but, you know.
I think this shows how hard this is going to be to explain this to Poplar Bluff, who can't even save next in month's car insurance to make their car insurance payment.
What's your name, hon? We gotta have it for the record.
Speaking to the
My name is
microphone.
Kay Imes.
Okay, Address?
Huh?
She needs your address for the record.
Your address.
1736 Whispering Oaks Place. I save my car insurance all year long. So when it comes due every 6 months, I pay it. My house insurance comes to due once a year. I pay it, just like taxes. Nobody in this town, they get their check, they spend it. 2 weeks later, there's a food pantry picking up packages. They won't understand a cash reserve. Oh, you mean you got $2 million? Let's spend it.
We hear you, Kay.
I want to see you all explain that to the people who live in this area.
I can comment a little bit to that. In a way, that's a really great example, because in a way, that's exactly what the utility is trying to do. You talked about, having to reserve money to pay your insurance payment and your house payment and your whatever. You do that to stay financially healthy, right? So you can pay your bills. That's responsible financial planning. So that's what this board, or council possibly, that's what I'm proposing in front of them, is they do. We know they have to fund the system for reliability. Somebody came up here and said, the people are awesome, they're right there, we have reliability, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't come for free.
No.
That takes planning, it takes capital planning on an engineering point of view, and it takes financial planning. And that's what we're putting in front of the council, saying, council, you have these expenses, you have these future expenses, you have these things.
Yeah.
And in order to fund all that and look healthy and be healthy and do prudent financial planning, this is what you need to do. So your example is excellent, because that's what's in front of the council tonight. So hopefully that kind of helps explain a picture on a personal level what we're trying to do.
Yeah, but they gotta have a new DVD or a new.
That's
cell phone.
personal planning on the individual community standpoint. That's different. We're looking at what the council's trying to achieve for their responsibility of the utility. They're trying to financially plan well and do prudent financial planning.
You want to come on up, please?
Christy Fraser Moore, 2001 Schweitzer Drive, Poplar Bluff. My question is, if you go back to reinforcing the PCA, on average, what would be that increase for
I would have to
a
project
household?
that out. That wasn't part of this.
Okay.
It's a future projection.
Okay.
They look at future power supply costs and then calculate that. I think it's on a yearly basis. It's only changed once a year. Is it changed monthly or yearly? Does anybody remember what that was?
It's annually.
Is it annually? That's what I thought.
Okay.
So that you would project out, for the next coming year, after you implement this, we're going to project that, you would project that out and implement what that should be.
I would like to comment, at that time, I was one of the citizens that was complaining about the PCA, and I distinctly remember that PCA was 42% of my bill. I thought it was out of line. I really feel like they were using the PCA to not do a rate increase. And that's what, in the analysis that we had in 2012, that's where they came up and said we need a rate increase. But the problem is, we did not readdress it. We sat back and said, we fixed it. And I'm sorry, you can't operate your home like that. We can't operate the city like that. You
And I
can't
think
run a business.
we understand. We see the negative.
You have to reevaluate. Things change.
But at 8.5% sounds a heck of a lot better than a 42% of my bill at this point, if that's what it was.
I agree. But my point is, I don't believe that the PCA will be anything like that, because we will have proper operating figures.
Your PCA was probably real high at that. Do you remember what it was per kilowatt hour? Because it was probably rolled up.
I do not. I didn't know any of this. I can tell you I had about a $300 and something bill, $325 bill, and I remember one year it was $68 for a PCA.
Will there be an analysis of that as another option to look at?
I don't know.
Another resource?
You talked about
I mean, we can provide that.
You talked about how it changed the track line if we did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said it could
Could
possibly.
possibly,
Yep,
yes.
yep. Because for what we know today, for the power supply cost projection that was in there, the 3% are what we know today. If power supply costs jump, that 3% could go up. If it goes down, the 3% could go down.
Okay.
But the PCA calculation, I can help with that process. You do have a current methodology, so that's a relatively easy process.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a lot of
Thank you.
variables in your electric rate. I mean, that affects your electric rate. Well, like it was mentioned, the high storm. I have a neighbor whose thermostat is set on
72.
78 degrees. I'm wondering if she'll lower it.
And that goes back to that cash balance. There are so many variables in running an electric utility, ice storms, wind storms, whatever, that we can't let that cash balance get to where it is. That's just because of the variables. So
The
that's what.
8.5% would cover without a PCA, that on your other chart.
For
that
what
go
we
on your
know for
projector.
2015 today.
Yes.
But when we do if you would go through the calculation, looking at future and coming
Yes.
back, I don't know what that would be.
You still
I
had to
did
do
not
the
do that.
3% the next year. I think people would be more accepting of that, the 8.5% or something close to it. These are all just projections, as opposed to the PCA where it was, what one gentleman said was 40% of a monthly usage, right?
But you would do it in tandem. But you can't really compare it to that only because we don't know what that PCA was. Let's just pretend the PCA was 3.5 cents. Let's just pretend it was that. And so the reason it was 42% of your bill is because that was not trued up and it was overstated. It wasn't trued up with the base rates like it should have. I don't know that. I'm just giving an example. Okay, this is an example. But that's why you'll see a PCA a large part of your bill, because it's not trued up. Typical PCAs, when they're trued up and whatever, range from a half a cent to a cent and a half. And then
Per
once it gets
kilowatt?
large, per kilowatt hour, and then you true it up into the base rates. So it teeters right around a half a cent to 1.5 cents. But when you're talking about a PCA that's 42% of your bill, I'm guessing, and it's only a guess, it was much more than a cent and a half.
Use an example, your health insurance keeps going up each year. Matter of fact, it goes up every second.
I've got a question on looking through the cash balance there. If the utility, or the cable company had not been sold, would it be safe to say that the utility fund would be bankrupt?
I did not do that analysis. So I have no
I'm
idea what
thinking
those
that it was
numbers
more
were.
than if the sale was more than $3 million.
I have not looked at the analysis either way.
Just an observation.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you for
Well,
your
thank you.
time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much for
Thank you.
listening to me.
Thank you to everyone who came up and asked questions. That's exactly what we need to be doing here.
Right now.
I know, Emma,
Thank you very much.
thank you
Thank
very
you
much
very
for your
much.
time tonight.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good job.
Be short. A couple things I wanted to add about the electric rate discussion piece is, one, this is far from over in discussion. Tonight was meant to be an informational session. It was never meant to be a vote of any sort whatsoever. It was meant to be informational only. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between administration and the Utility Advisory Board, and then obviously then eventually needs to subsequently come to here. I foresee this process being, hopefully, we can get it resolved in May, so that gives us plenty of time, using the whole month of April, to analyze the situation, to be able to ask questions, and for us to be able to provide the right answers. And then at that point, I'm hoping the advisory board will be ready to make a recommendation, and then they'll subsequently come to this board. The other thing I just wanted to just make sure the public understands is the fear that was brought on by just, this 20% over 5 years. Right now I can't tell you it's not going to happen, but I can't tell you it is going to happen either. Like Don indicated, it's something you have to analyze on a year-to-year basis. And so year one, yes, we're going to ask and recommend, administration is going to recommend to the advisory board an 8.5% increase for year one with putting the PCA in place. Now, that's going to be discussed, I'm sure, at great length with the advisory board, and then eventually getting here. My goal is to get this in front of the council for consideration in May, but please don't hold on to the 20% figure, because how many of you in this room know exactly what you're going to do in 5 years? No one knows. No one even knows what they're going to do in a year, I'm sure. We all have variables, what happens to us from a year-to-year basis. So I just ask for your patience. We understand this is not good news to ever have to pay more money out of our pockets for anything. But just bear with us. We appreciate your patience. But if you ever have any questions regarding how this all works, please come talk to me or my staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item B. The City Council will review the purchasing policy for the City of Poplar Bluff.
Madam Mayor, the purchasing policy that came before council was basically pushed to another workshop session for today. It is voting as well. First, we were going to get comments back from the council. We did get comments from some of the council. We didn't get it from all, but we just left in place what the original proposed policy is. And just to reiterate this, let's talk about the low end. Right now, anything that's purchased below $5,000, we're not getting competitive quotes for. There's no mechanism that actually that either encourages or holds a department head to that standard. And so this new policy does that, is okay, from $1,501 to $3,000, you have to go get an informal quote. So what's an informal quote? Well, get a fax, get an email, get something in writing that shows that this product or service equals X. We want a minimum of 3 if we can get it, and then we just let the discretion of the department head make that decision as to who that goes to. We obviously always encourage lowest bid. Now, the reason why that's informal, because we're not doing a formal solicitation through the paper, to an advertisement. Now, the $3,000 to the $24,999 is a formal solicitation, where we are reaching out to vendors to provide us with a formal quote for a good item or service. And so that we're in no way diluting or removing any authority away from this council. When they approve the budget, that's the appropriation, folks. They're approving roughly a $69 million budget overall funds. That's approved, that's done. Now, can the council amend and change that? Yes, they can. But in no way are we taking away from them any oversight. They see any bills they ever request. Soon, once we have a new web design, they're going to be able to see every single check that's ever written and to who. There's going to be, we want to provide a lot more transparency to what we have now. But in this case, we're just trying to give flexibility to the department heads to go out and just make sure they're making smart purchases with the dollars that were already appropriated to them through the budgeting process. We're not asking them to ask for any additional dollars. We're not giving any authority to myself or any department head to go off and do a run on the bank to spend money loosely without any approval from this council. They approved the budget, we're still following it, we just want to use this policy to follow the approved budget. Now, if it's an item that's not in the budget, then that does have to come here. I don't care if it's $1, I don't care if it's $10,000. That has to come in front of this body if it's not in the budget. So I just want to make sure I made that point clear, is we are encouraging competition from as low as $1,501 all the way up to $24,999. Now, is my mind set on any of these numbers? No, not at all. Could we just leave them the way it is? Sure, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm just trying to give you guys a proposal what I think would be a little bit more efficient. I worked through all the department heads, everyone agrees. But again, we are your humble servants, and we'll follow whatever you guys prescribe.
Mr. Kaplan, can you give an example of how a budgeted item would be done this way?
So a budgeted item, so let's say it's an item, let's say, for example, Dennis Kirby, our interim superintendent in the streets, he needed we had a new pump, we hadn't had the hosing to go with it, and it was roughly around $1,600 for the new hose. And so what he would do under that circumstance is he would go to 3 vendors, hopefully, we are obviously local. If we don't have them local, then obviously get as many as you can local, and then external, get a minimum of 3. You would get that either through an email, a fax, some kind of in writing as to what the prices are. He got a quote from one that said $1,600, but let's say someone beat it at $1,500, and then someone's at $2,100. We obviously would want to take the $1,500 quote if it's the same product. And so in that case, you had an item that was already approved in the budget. He went and got 3 informal quotes. Boom, he's good to go. He has to keep, obviously, on file those 3 quotes, so in case it's ever requested by anyone on the council, myself, or the public, about, hey, show me those quotes. Here it is.
So basically, if a department head did a purchase like that, and they document it, it's there for review, and if you have improprieties, then and any department did that, then you would revamp how that procedure is done.
I would, yeah. If I saw it, let's say a supervisor or a department head was not following policy, they'd be reprimanded.
Okay.
And then if I wasn't following it, I should be reprimanded.
Okay.
Can we go back to the idea of handing out the $25,000 check? You remember what the citizen who came up, she's not on here now, but she brought up that we're basically handing over. Why do we need such?
The answer is you don't. It's a hypothetical figure. It's the figure that I used in Muskegon. A lot of this policy is a lot of what I used in Muskegon. And really, to not reinvent the wheel, I just took that and gave it to my department heads, had them look at it, have them redline it, and said, hey, look, this is what we think. So I don't want you to think that, God, I just have to have this $25,000 figure. I don't. You don't even have to change it at all. I'm just trying to find a way to make it more efficient for your department heads to do their job without every little single thing having to go through an advertisement. For $5,000, guys, I mean, it is a lot of money to any of us, but to a government and to an enterprise to our size, it's not. It's a lot of items, and when you advertise, there's times where it costs over several $100s to advertise in DAR these items. And so actually, it'll save you money in the long run. So you're not paying advertising costs as much anymore. Secondly, is these levels are lockstep with the release of our purchasing card program, where everyone in the city that's approved by a department head will get a purchasing card. It's like a debit card for the government, which we control the purchasing power on those. Anything that's $1,500 or less does not require a PO. But if it's budgeted, we encourage them to use the P card, because if you look at the majority of the checks the city writes, it's for those low dollar items, and it's just a waste of ink sometimes and the labor to run a check for $5.49.
And the P card documents all purchases.
It's a permanent record. And so if any time, let's say, anyone did have any improprieties, it's a permanent record.
Yeah, permanent record.
It's something you can't get rid of. It's a permanent record. Law enforcement would be all over it, and they can use it to prosecute someone. And so no matter what we do, we can't put you can micromanage until the cows come home. You cannot prevent someone, if someone's hell-bent and stealing from the government, or defrauding the government, or doing something wrong, you can't stop them. They're just going to do it. But the key is that we put in policies and procedure in place to where we obviously tell them, hey, look, this is what you shouldn't do. If you do, you're going to, one, either get disciplined up to being fired, or two, you may be, prosecuted in a court of law.
Now, currently, $5,000 purchases are done by RFP.
They're done by advertisement.
Okay, so I looked at the cost in December on the RFPs. I think we had 3. And the cost to the city for those 3 RFPs, I don't know how much the RFPs were for, but it totaled $1,340, $1,340.
Yeah.
I think we got to have, in my opinion, I think we got to have a happy medium. I think 5,000 is too low, and with me, I think 25,000 is too high. But I definitely see where we will save money if we don't have to do that many RFPs. I don't know what we did in November or what we did in October, but that's a lot of money that we have going out for something. And if we're around that $5,000 figure and we're talking about goods and items that can be gotten by faxes, and like you said, going with a 3, purchasing the cheapest, documenting it, and it's a budgeted item, it's already been discussed that these things will be needed. To me, it's just trying to get to a number that the council can live with. And personally, I can live with 15,000, not 25. I think 15,000, anything above that's RFP. We're going to save money, and there's responsibility on the department heads, the responsibility with the city manager that these monies are spent appropriately, and if they're not, they're going to be easily seen by review to do that.
Well, to reiterate the purchasing process here is when an item is either ordered or is procured, or a service, we have a purchase order process which needs to be fixed. But right now, it's just a manual process, meaning that someone physically fills out a form, and they're asking for, you have to have departmental sign-off, you have to have finance sign-off, and you have to have my sign-off. It goes through a lot of different desks before it's signed off on, before that check is even cut. And so it's not, there is not a single person, including myself, they can just go to Pam and say, look, cut this check for this item. If Pam doesn't agree with it, or Mark doesn't agree with it, it doesn't happen. And so you do have your fail-safes in place.
You have oversight.
You have oversight. You have on this team, you have the council, but you have multiple different levels of oversight. And that's what I like about how it's set up is, you got your clerk who reports to the council the same as your city manager does, but she's also your treasurer as well. So she has signatory authority on checks. She has signatory authority on your bank's statements. And it helps. Now, what Neil will tell you, Neil Conway, our consultant, is there's no perfect system you can put in place to be able to ensure, again, anyone's not doing anything they're not supposed to be doing. But I can tell you from what I see, we got a pretty good system in place. The only thing I encourage differently is what I don't like about our PO system. It doesn't encumber against the budget, and I want to fix that with a new accounting system once we get to that point. We're just not there yet. Is because in Muskegon, whenever I signed off and approved on a purchase order electronically, it actually encumbered against the budget, meaning that money was no longer available and you can't spend it. Right now, we have these manual purchase orders, so unless you're going in there manually and looking up numbers and you don't know what checks are outstanding, you're guessing that you have money in there.
It balances it out
Right.
when you, yeah.
Right. So it's kind of messy right now, but we're going to tighten it up.
Okay.
We're going to, if you want to change that to 15,000, you would have to make a motion to change it to 15,000, and I don't know if anyone else has any suggestions. Did you have any suggestions, Ed?
Well, they were the same suggestions I had last time, and when I looked at what was in my packet, it looked like a lot was in, and then we got this new one that says, we got the wrong one. Where did that document come from, which is basically what we're doing now? With the exception of the radius, and I agreed with Mayor Pro Tem Rushing on that, it would be a lot easier to just say in Butler County than look at a radius on a map and figure out if that area is within it or not.
The what happened was the purchasing policy that was given you for consideration, what was it, a couple of meetings ago, is the one you have in your packets today. The one you were given previously, it was just, I don't know where that version came from. It was an older version. It was not the correct version that I proposed. The one that I proposed, previous council meeting, is the one that you have in your packet that was sent to you as a correction. That was my version.
So if you want to make a change, you need to make a motion to change it to whatever you were wanting, and the same for
Just
council.
for some more clarification, okay. My understanding is, we've already approved the budget, and if these are items that are in that budget, we would never see it again, or else we'd be voting on it twice, okay? And on this other purchasing policy, I still think it ought to be at 5,000, and if it's over that, then we need to go ahead and approve it. I mean, this is over and above what we've already budgeted. This is new items that came up, unforeseen items, the way I'm looking at it.
Well, I agree. Anything that's not budgeted should come back to the council no matter what, even if it's $1. I'm talking about just budgeted items is what this policy refers to.
Well, I wouldn't want to see something, real low, have to come back to us, and, it wouldn't bother me. But what I'm saying is the purchases that are not in the budget, if they're over 5,000, we should get the bids on them and come back before the council. If it's under that, I'm fine with our department heads and you and the finance director and everything okaying that.
So what we're trying to change, if you got a $5,000 budget and you're paying $500 to bid it out, you're paying 10.
This is-
Yeah, no,
over
he's
and above.
talking about non-budgeted items.
Yeah.
And I agree with
Sure.
Mr. DeGaris on non-budgeted items. And I'm just saying on budgeted items, instead of the 25,000, I'm saying 15. Now, if the council's fine with 25, then that's fine. I agree with what he's saying on the 5,000. Non-budgeted items would come back to us, and they should.
I think so too.
But on the budgeted items, to avoid some of the RFPs, and trusting the oversight we have with the 3 signatures, and the 25 probably is fine. I'm just saying that I could live with 15, but whatever the council
I
wants to
think
do is
15 is
fine.
quite a bit better than 25. So we have two different things going on. You're wanting to change the budgeted items down to 15,000.
Well, he'd be changing the formal bid process from from $3,001 up to it'd be $14,999.99.
Yes.
And then anything that's 15,000 or above would either be a formal RFP, a formal advertisement, something or RFI, you name it.
Okay, and this is different from what he's talking about.
Yeah, what Ed, I think, is talking about is if it is a non-budgeted item, if it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, if it's 5,000 or more and it's a non-budgeted item, that has to come back in front of council, which I totally agree.
I agree too.
But what happens, my only question is, let's say it's $4,999, that's okay for us to make adjustment in the budget without council approval?
Well, it would come up, later with the budget and adjustment, but, we've got to, you will have oversight on it, we'll see it. I just don't think it's something we necessarily need to vote on every time.
What I typically do,
Most of the stuff's going to be covered in the budget, and I don't see that coming up very often.
right, I mean, we don't have, we have a line item budget, but what I tell people is the key, if they got money within an org, for example, and let's say they saved money in salaries and they want to transfer, do a budget adjustment, transferring money from salaries down, let's say, to contractual services, I let them do it because it's the same money, they're just moving around within the same department. And so that kind of stuff I do to help them adjust their budgets. The other thing is, in regards to budget adjustments, I always try to get the council approved. That's the standard, that's the gold standard of doing it, is get your council approved before you buy the item, unless it's an emergency. But what we can do is maybe we'll provide a monthly report to the council, is if anything is in that range that you're referring to, we'll just make sure we're reporting to the council with what we purchased, why we purchased it, and then that way we can provide full transparency to this board and to the public as to what's going on.
That would allow us to oversee.
So that way you can scan through it and.
Like I mentioned last time, to me and probably the biggest portion of the citizens, $5,000 is a major purchase. Now, we've already approved the budget for the major items, and I don't think a lot of those are going to come up. But if they do, I think we need to see them and be able to justify why we needed them or okay it.
Yes.
But I think this was, in talking with Jack and Ed and Mark, we've discussed this several occasions, and I can see this saving us money on the bidding process, having to do it in the paper all the time, which I was amazed how much the process of doing it in the paper cost us, you know. And I would like to make a motion that we reduce this down to $15,000 from the 25. It'll be 14,999.
Okay. Do we have any seconds on that?
I second.
Okay. Do we need a roll call, or do we just do?
May I ask you a question? Is the radius still standing at 25 miles from City Hall, or?
Yeah, it is. That's the way it is at the policy. But you just want to use the local area defined as Butler County?
Yes, I think
That'd
it'd
be
be
easier.
easier.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
And then if we see this is successful, we can revisit this issue and expand those numbers.
Yeah, this policy is the policy of the council. You guys
Okay.
can amend it
Okay.
anytime.
Okay, we've got a motion on the table to bring that down from 25 to 14,999 in a second. All in favor of that? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion carries, so that will be a change. Did anyone want to make another motion on any other changes? Did you want to make one?
I'll make the motion instead of the 25-mile radius from City Hall, that it be Butler County.
I second.
I said,
Okay. Motion is second to change it from the 25-mile radius to Butler County. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Do we need any other changes? Nobody wants to, okay. All right.
Supposed to need to move it to voting session.
So if there's no other comments, then if someone wants to go ahead and move it to the voting session tonight, so we can go ahead and,
I make a motion, we move it to the voting session tonight.
motion is second to move item B to the voting session tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, the City Council will review bids received for financing proposals relative to the city's disaster recovery plan and 5-year capital plan.
Madam Mayor, this advertisement was sent out to all local banks, and it was to finance the capital improvement plan for the city of Poplar Bluff. That was approved by the council through our budgeting process. And we're looking to budget to secure financing for the first 3 years of our capital improvement plan, plus reimburse ourselves for the equipment that has already been ordered for our consolidated 911 center. After solicitation went on, we did receive one bid from Commerce Bank. Now, Commerce Bank isn't the one financing it, they're just the one brokering the deal. They're going to be the placement agent with a investor. And so that paperwork is still being worked on. This is not, I'm not looking for final approval on it today. I just want okay to proceed with talking with Commerce Bank to refine down the proposal to get it back in front of council for final approval and consideration.
That was a mouthful.
You want me to repeat it?
No.
No.
You want a motion to move it, we need to vote on it tonight, or?
Well, yeah, what I'm looking for a vote is to award the proposal to Commerce Bank contingent upon, obviously myself and Gilmore and Bell working out the idiosyncrasies of the agreement that'll have to come back and forth in front of the council for final approval.
So you want to you want to move it forward?
I just want to move forward with, I want to be able to explore this one bid. I need permission to do that.
I make a motion that he's allowed to move forward with the preparation.
Motion is second. We will move item C to the voting session, which will be held tonight. All in favor?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Is this the one that shows the fire department buildings as collateral?
It does.
Anything else? Okay. Motion is second to move item C to the voting session, which will be held tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
You oppose?
Yes, I don't like the idea of putting a fire department as collateral.
I don't either. I'm a no too.
Okay, so it still carries, I suppose. All right. Item D, the city council will review a proposed debt management policy.
Madam Mayor, myself, our finance advisors from First Southwest, special counsel from Brian Cave, been working really hard on this, is before we proceed with any future debt in regards to bonding, we want to make sure the city has a comprehensive debt management policy, which we currently do not have. And so what you see in front of you is all the red lines between three different parties of what we're looking at doing as a comprehensive policy that takes care of everything from general obligation debt on down to revenue bonds. And so that's the first piece. The second piece is, if you, like I indicated in prior communication, sections 9 and 10 of the proposed debt management policy. Those areas I really wanted you to focus on for tonight's discussion, because if the council is okay with those particular sections, those sections will set the guidelines for the city to move forward with the financing for the 8 Points development. And so there's two pieces here. Piece one is I'm looking for guidance to move forward on that financing per those guidelines in sections 9 and 10 of the proposed policy. And then two is I want you to look at how sections 9 and 10 fit into the broader scope of the proposed policy, and then obviously come back with your red lines to the greater policy for a future meeting for it to be voted on. So, but if you want to wait for the whole thing, that's fine with me as well. I'm just trying to progress the financing piece for the 8 Points development, because I think they're getting a little antsy. They waited for me to get familiar with the bushels of documents that were thrown my way. And not only did I have to educate myself, your financial advisors from First Southwest had to do such. So I'm just trying to find a way to progress through, because even if you hypothetically approve sections 9 and 10, you're not looking at a financing probably not until mid-May to mid-June.
Are we referring to page 173 on the total packet?
Hold on one second. I know I'm in sections 9 and 10. I'm not sure of the page number.
Well, does it begin with retention of consultants and other related parties? Is that what it says?
Hold on one sec. I'll bring it up real quick.
Because it's going by Roman numeral, isn't it? Roman numeral for the section?
Yeah, it's Roman. It starts in Roman
Because
numeral
you know,
9.
there's numbers and sub-numbers and...
Right. But let me, this is the purchasing policy. Let me fast forward to,
On the printout, it looks like it's either 14 or 114, but on the thumbnail, it's 173.
yeah, let me go to 173.
That should be right.
And then under item A, under that, is that a definition or is that a language for bond counsel?
One second, I'm on the first one, as I see the section 10, but let me find section 9. There's 8. 9. Yeah, I got it on 169. Yeah.
Well, 169 begins with,
With debt structuring and marketing.
okay, 169, on page 169, I don't have a Roman numeral. I do, I see it now, okay.
It's right
That's
above
right, I
that.
got it, yeah.
Yep, it's
between
like in the
those.
middle.
Yeah, I got it.
I didn't see it at first
Okay.
either, I blew by it. But yeah, this will take care of the financing, and if you'd like, I can go into a little bit of detail about what we're going to be proposing in regards to the TIF notes and the reimbursement of the 8 Points development. Was that all right, Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in our redevelopment agreement, the reimbursement of The developer is at hand. We're already past our 180 days of, for our first 180 days of reimbursing them. Now, what does that mean? That means our interest rate went from 8% to 10% accrued. And so obviously, we have a strong incentive to refinance this as fast as we can. But secondly, the way that special counsel is directing us towards financing is not for the city to be the issuer of the bonds, but a different agency that would be created here locally, like an IDA. I think that's an Industrial Development Authority. We have had one here in Poplar Bluff 25 years ago, but it was already dissolved. And so we would need to create a new one, and then we let that IDA be the issuer and not the city. And then there's some other pieces to where how we want the bonds to be marketed, how they'll be sold, who would be exposed to it. We want these bonds to be available for institutional buyers. And what is an institutional buyer, if you don't know? It's $100,000 increments for each bonds. Originally, it was proposed by the developer of 5,000 increments. I'm not comfortable with that. The reason why I'm not comfortable with it is, let's say there was folks here locally in Poplar Bluff that bought these bonds, and let's say the development didn't progress as hoped for, and it can't pay for the debt. You go into full default. What do you think is going to happen to those folks? They're going to lose their money. I don't want to see that happen to anyone here. And not that I'm not casting a shadow over the development. Do I think that it's going to go belly up? No, don't read into it. I feel that investments of this sort belong with institutional investors, not
where the risk can be absorbed.
Right, not with individuals who can't absorb that risk. So,
okay.
But anyway, if there's any questions about.
Did we have an agreement with the developers that, because we had, some other bond issuances and stuff that you were talking about? We have an agreement or a contract with the developers to do it the way that we'd heard about previously?
Some of it yes, some of it no. So we do have a redevelopment agreement which we entered into that says that we will reimburse them through bonding. But the portion that's not in the agreement is that geosegmentation that Mr. Bornstein indicated. And secondly, the increments, they can't control that. The way that the debt is issued is controlled by this body. And it's not controlled by the developer or in that agreement. Both those items are mute, meaning it's not in the agreement.
And when was that agreement made?
So that agreement was entered into, that was in August of, Pam, what year?
2013 was I think the last.
It was on 2013 was the last amendment to that redevelopment agreement.
So the solidification of the redevelopment agreement occurred in August of 2013?
2013.
Okay.
And with us not going with that agreement we had, is this going to cause us to get into a lawsuit? With
No, actually it's the opposite.
Going
We don't want to get into a lawsuit, and so that's why we're progressing with doing the debt issuance. And so if Mr. Bornstein filed suit and say, no, he's filing suit that, no, we don't want the city to issue 100,000 increments, but 5,000, he's going to lose hands down because the court's going to say, well, the city can issue that debt anyway, it sees fit, and it's fulfilling their obligation.
Well, I know, was it Stifel Nicholas that
Stiefel.
we had talked to before? Was there an agreement that we would use them or?
Yep, and we have to use them as the underwriter. That's correct.
And that was done in August?
In August of.
So that's when that decision was made?
They were all made.
Had to use Stiefel?
We have to use Stiefel as an underwriter. We had no choice.
Okay.
That's very unusual, but in this case, you had a developer that said, not only are you going to agree to these terms, you're going to use this underwriter, which normally you would do that through a competitive bid process. But on top of that, we have a letter from Stifel Nicholas that they do not represent the city, they represent the developer. And so keep that in mind. They're not in it for our best interest, they're in it to gain the best yields for their investor or investors.
Well, what I was worried about on that, if we gave a word or reach into an agreement or a contract, that if we didn't honor that, what would nobody else would want to come and a developer or even a manufacturer to come, that if they're not going to stand by their word and what they say they're going to do, they're not going to take a chance with it.
I agree with that. We're going to honor our word. We're going to do it in a way that's it's permissible under law. We're going to do it in a way that we're going to protect future investors. We're going to do it with full disclosure, and we're going to do it in the best standards that are and best practices that municipal governments use. That's what this policy is we looked out there around our area in the Midwest and found, and no, this isn't Michigan, and we found a policy that we really liked, and we just started redlining it for what you see in that document. But no, we are going to honor our word, we're going to bond, but we're going to do so in a manner that the city feels it's appropriate.
And so there is a possibility of a suit, but you don't think...
There's always a possibility so that people can sue for whatever you want nowadays. I think that's the reason why we got special counsel from Brian Cave helping us through this. On top of that, we still have Gilmore and Bell working with us as well. I think with Gilmore and Bell and Brian Cave, I think we're pretty covered.
I think it's important, we read between the lines of the contract. It's not really a good thing when an outside source comes in, a developer of any kind, and dictates 100% of what we're going to do. And, this came close to being that. So we're taking the liberties allowed by the contract to protect the city of Poplar Bluff, because if you gave them everything they wanted, that could be a high-risk element.
I mean, to reiterate the predicament for the public, so you guys can understand what we're dealing with, is we have a development that has 2 buildings on it. We have Menards and we got neighborhood Walmart. We have a projection of what they will collect annually. The Menards is right around $26–27 million a year, and then you got the neighborhood Walmart, which is around $10 million a year. When you take those two, and you annualize out, obviously we know what the annual amount is, you take the sales tax collection from that, that's not enough to pay the debt on $14 million, principal and interest. It's nowhere near enough. And so what the developer is saying is, okay, that's okay, because we're going to develop the rest of the site that is going to generate enough of that sales tax to make up the gap. That's where I get nervous. And so, like Mr. Black, I use a comment he made, simple math. Well, simple math is, right now you got 2 buildings out there, and you got maybe 10% of the development done, and yet you've got a developer that's saying, hey, pay me $14 million, you're going to have to trust me that I'm going to develop it to where you can get enough sales tax to pay your debt. I'm sorry if that makes me a little nervous. I guess I could turn a blind eye to it, maybe like some other administrator would do, wouldn't be me, and just not care about the investor. But you're looking at someone that it's my credentials that's being put on that disclosure document. I want to make sure that they understand it. I want to make sure they understand the risks that they're associated with this investment. And then also our public understands that when we issue debt, we don't do so lightly. We do it to where we can repay it.
Well, you just mentioned that the revenue we currently have on sales tax is not enough to satisfy.
Not even the interest.
And the important thing to understand, not necessarily for our municipality, but there are municipalities in this state and other states that if they can't have the revenue enough to pay the interest and the principal, and they don't want to default on the bond, they have to pull out a general revenue to pay that.
That's the city of Independence, Missouri.
And so how long do you think that would last with us, pulling out $300,000 a year to satisfy a bond? So we just have to be very precautious on how we set this up, that we protect the city and the investors.
Yeah, and we just got to have a comfort that whatever debt we float, it can be repaid. And do I believe Mr. Bornstein is going to do everything in his power to fill that property? Absolutely. I do believe that. I do. I don't think he's lying to me, because I think it's in his best interest as well, and to his investors. I just want to make sure that it gets here sooner rather than later, because to give you another perspective, is the same developer developed in Arnold, Missouri, and the city of Arnold said, yeah, we'll bond, but we put the stipulation into the agreement that we won't bond until you're 90% developed. I would feel a lot better if I was 90% developed. I would feel great.
But we don't have that in our
No,
agreement.
right now you got a big pile of dirt out there being moved around, and you got 2 stores. And those 2 stores are pretty much cannibalizing the stores you already have. You got Menards cannibalizing Home Depot, and you got neighborhood Walmart cannibalizing Kroger and everyone else that's in town. And so that makes me a little nervous. Because, I mean, and then I hear possibly an Academy of Sports coming. Who do you think that's going to cannibalize, Ed? Dunham's. That's who that's going to hit. And so it's almost like we're taking money here, we're putting it here, but we're getting less return on investment on it over here. That's what I'm worried about, is I want to protect our existing sales tax base that provides the gentleman that's sitting over there in the blue and the gun and the badge. You know, I want to protect him and his services that provide this community. And more your sales tax diminishes, the less money I have available to pay someone like him. And that makes me nervous, because I want to protect every one of these employees that provide the services that the public wants. And this whole thing has made me nervous, but I'm getting more and more comfort with it. As you can see, I'm kind of warming up to it, and I think we're going to get there. But I just want to get a little more assurances they're going to give me development that we don't already have. That's what's making me nervous.
That was my concern, if we made an agreement with them, we need to honor it and be people of our word, even if it was the previous council that did it. Just like, we did something on the manufacturing with Mid-Continental just, last month.
Yep.
And I'd hate to, for a council after we're all gone, come in and say, well, I don't care what they said, we're not going to do it anymore.
Well, there's nothing, yes, sir, there's nothing in what we're trying to achieve that violates our agreement if we issue the bonds. But boy, I sure have a hard time if you went just face up and issued bonds and they only have $300,000 revenue and we got to pay 6 just for interest and dipping into our general funds for $300,000 a year.
And what the developer's going to tell you is you don't have any general fund risk. Well, he's right and he's wrong. Where he's right is we don't have to use general fund proceeds to make up any gap in the payment because we're held harmless. But then guess what happens? It's a reportable event. And when it becomes a reportable event through the SEC, what do you think happens to the city's credit?
Drops like a safe.
You're going to go from an A+ probably to whatever they're going to drop you to. And they're going to say, well, don't invest in the city of Poplar Bluff because they don't pay their bills. And we don't want that either. And so that's why it's an interesting tightrope, is whatever debt this this TIF authority floats. Are we responsible for it? Yes. If we default, are we exposed in the general fund? No, but the consequence of not filling that gap is horrible. And that's why I think, I'm not the city administrator of Independence, Missouri, but my guess is that's why they're doing it. They had I think a Bass Pro that was built there. It didn't go as planned. And they're taking it on the chin for millions of dollars a year. And I just don't want to see that here. I just want to see a good development. I want to reiterate that I want to see development that's not already here. So I can see new money coming in here.
I thought that was my line.
I am. I'm stealing it. And that's what I want to see. Now I can't control a developer. The developer wants to keep putting stuff in there that we already had. I can't stop him. And will it pay my debt? Yeah, it will. But the unfortunate part about it is it'll erode your revenue stream that you had with those equal stores in the city limits. But that's another story. But yes, I promise you, we're going to honor your word. We're going to honor the city's word. We're going to progress, and they're going to be happy, and we're going to move on. But I just want to make sure we're doing it safely.
And the other thing and I may have just missed it, and all that thing, I saw where you could do this or you could do that, but there's nothing in there I don't remember seeing anything about with council's approval.
In
the debt management, different line items in the draft and different things.
Well, the whole policy has to be approved by the council, but I cannot legally issue any debt without your signature, without your guys sign off. I can't do it because the first thing you have to do is, you have to get approval. Obviously as bond counsel, Gilmore Bell has to get those approvals with the council. We can just kind of reiterate state law in this, that indicates that process, but that's already state law. It's up, we can add it then, it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, some of, like, said like a certain amount of debt or bonds from such and such, I'm sure that you'll get the best deal that we could possibly get on them.
I'll try.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure try.
But like I say, I'd like to make sure that the council, sees that type of things. And,
Yep.
and I don't think that's, a lot of people say, we try to micromanage. I don't think that's it. That's, the citizens elected us to be the governing body. You work for us.
Yep.
So we watch what you do. Now, we don't need to go down to the street department, utilities department, or anywhere else and tell them how to do the job, because that's your position for those department heads, and then the department heads send it on down. That would be micromanaging, and we don't need to do that.
No,
we
you're-
do need to do what the people elected us to do.
No, you're correct, that you guys cannot shuck away your responsibility as a fiduciary agent of this city. You can't give it to me even if you wanted to. So I agree with that. Because if the SEC investigates a bad deal, they're not going to come after me, they're going to come after you guys.
Yeah. So this is just like a workshop item, and it's a draft, because there's a lot of lines and different things in it, so I try to think, okay, am I supposed to add this or not, and take this away, and...
Right, we just wanted to show you kind of the progression of our document, of our discussions. And so, but the main thing from this discussion tonight was just to make sure you guys were okay with those particular sections in 9 and 10 that are related to the 8.3 development agreement, so we can proceed. Or we can just wait until the whole thing, you guys are ready for the whole thing. But I didn't want to show you just sections of the whole policy without showing you the whole thing.
Yeah. So I don't want to take a chance, wait too long and take a chance of that interest rate going up again.
Well, I think,
But my concern
yeah.
is that we honor, what we said we would do.
Yes, I think we've got to move forward with it because we need to address this with the developer.
We do. We do. And they're anxiously awaiting.
Okay.
Does anyone want to move this to the April 6th voting session?
I make a motion to open to the April 6th voting session.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second to move item D to the April 6th voting session. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item E, the City Council will review a proposed ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a grant agreement relative to home repair opportunity grant agreement.
Hello, Mayor, Council. On October 3rd, 2014, the city submitted a grant application to the Missouri Housing Development Commission for the Home Repair Opportunity Grant. In December, we were notified that we did indeed receive a grant award for the amount of $24,750. In order to use this grant, we will have to assist one eligible family homeowner. The max amount is $22,500. The remaining amount of the grant is $2,250, which will go towards administrative costs. I am requesting the mayor to execute the grant in order for us to receive the grant funding. The grant year period is April 1st, 2015, and it goes through March 31st, 2016.
Does anyone have any questions for her? Anyone want to move it to the voting session tonight?
I make a motion to move to the voting session.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second to move item E to the voting session tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Item F, the City Council will review a proposed resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a community development block grant application for funding for housing for families that were affected by the 2011 floods.
Yes, I am requesting the mayor to execute a grant application that I will be submitting to the Department of Economic Development for community block grant funding. This grant will assist families who were affected by the 2011 flood. The proposed project is a housing activity which will provide new construction to 7 families that were located in the floodplain. We are requesting from the Department of Economic Development $994,711. The city will provide an in-kind contribution in the amount of $177,500. I have also secured an agreement with Habitat for Humanity to donate land, and it's 4.7 acres, and the cash value estimated right now is $27,500. So the total contribution for the city will be $205,000. The total project cost will be $1,199,711.
This is the one that's due on Friday, correct?
No,
No.
the one that's due on Friday is the grant agreement for the Hero.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yes. But I do need to submit this application to DED. I have submitted them a draft application, and they are very excited about the project.
Good.
It's always good to build new houses.
Yes, and we are, to me, it seems like we are at a point in Poplar Bluff's growth and just all the changes going on that people need. They need good housing, so anything that helps with that, I think, is.
Well, Madam Mayor, the one thing that I've been concerned about is, even though the development to the north of the city is great and all fun, but I think some people feel like they're being left out. The southern part of the city feels like, hey, what about us?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we're not forgetting about them. Renisha has done some great work. Mr. Avery has done some great work. Guys, you're not forgotten. No way. We're not for 1 second forgetting about our folks in the southern part or in the middle part of this city. We're excited about the development in the north, don't get us wrong, but we're not going to forget about the folks in the entire city. And that's what I'm excited about, and I think Renisha is doing a great job, and I sure appreciate her efforts, Dennis's efforts, and the support that we've gotten from other agencies.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone want to make a motion to move this to the voting session tonight?
So moved.
I second.
Motion is second to move item F to the voting session tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item G, the City Council will review a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve a request for a conditional use permit to allow for the sale of alcohol for fundraising events in a C3 Central Area Commercial District. The applicant is Rogers Theater, Inc., Christy Moore, 201 North Broadway, Poplar Bluff, Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As you stated, this is a request from Rogers Theater Incorporated. It was originally addressed to the Planning and Zoning Commission by Cal Million, who is shows on the paperwork here. However, at the Planning and Zoning meetings, the president of Rogers Theater Incorporated, Christy Frazier Moore, represented them at our meetings, and I do have a letter from the Rogers Theater Board allowing her to represent them. If the clerk wants that, I will present that to her now, if I can get it out of this folder.
Thank you.
They've been working on Rogers Theater for some time. They do request a conditional use permit to sell liquor by the drink, 5% beer and wine. This would be at certain fundraising events and certain events at the Rogers Theater. It would be select events. It would not be any and all events. It would be select events of their choosing. It would be a regular liquor license. If this isn't a C3 Central Area Commercially Zoned District at 204 North Broadway, and the most of the surrounding land use is C3 Central Commercial. To the south across Pine Street, Pine Boulevard, would be Commercial CX3 Mixed Use. Planning and Zoning Commission addressed this. There were a few questions, very few objections. It was well supported, through our meetings. It is located within the downtown commercial district. Restoration and reuse of this building as a community theater works well into the downtown revitalization plan. Alcohol sales would be available during certain select events at the theater for fundraising purposes. At this time, they are hoping to have 6 to 10 events a year. This building meets the required distance from the neighboring churches and is not a restaurant serving alcohol. Therefore, it does not conflict with the nearest pub, Jim and Jerry's Pub, at the corner of South Broadway and Vine Street, so there's not a conflict with our ordinances there. Staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this request for a conditional use permit with the following stipulation: that the conditional use permit would go with the business owner. If the business were to change hands or to sell, which is very unlikely, the new owner would have to apply for a conditional use permit to continue the use of this alcohol sales at this location. Ms. Fraser Moore is here tonight to answer questions that I might not be able to. Are there any questions for me on this item?
Can I ask a question real quick? What kind of liquor license are we talking about? You said a 5% beer wine, but
They are in the C3 district, and whatever the appropriate licensing would be for that.
okay,
is
but
what they
that
would be
doesn't
requesting.
limit them to just 6 to 10 events a year.
No, it
They
does
have
not.
to- okay.
It does
Okay.
not. No. This would be a fully issued license from your perspective.
They would have the actual license there.
Right. This just be used for special events.
Right, depending on the venue that they were presenting at that time, that would probably be what their determination was. And there was, go ahead, Peter.
It's at their discretion.
At their discretion.
Technically, what we're giving them, they could do it.
You're allowing them to have a liquor license. That's what you're doing.
Would they have to, could people under 21 enter at those events?
There would have to be some restrictions on that. There was some discussion upon that during the planning and zoning meetings. I believe, David, you had a question or two on some of that, and some other ones did as well. I would like to let Ms. Moore address that specifically, since she is the president of the board. And if there were concerns and the council wanted to make certain concessions or directions, this would be the appropriate time to address that.
Thank you, Dennis. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. Thank you for having me. As far as your question, yes, we would still allow 21 and years younger into the facility. However, we take it very seriously, and we want to keep our community safe and protected. So what we would do, they would come through a line and they would be banded, much like they do currently at the Coliseum. We also plan on putting controls on where they can only have so many drinks within a certain time frame. We don't want to promote major party mode in any way, shape, or form. And we would do that by, we figured the easiest way, once we ban them, we take a Sharpie and we mark them how many drinks they have per visit, and they would only be allowed, I think we've discussed 3 drinks within like a 3-hour period. So we're being very conservative. We are just truly trying to raise money to fix the roof before it falls in.
Simple enough.
I just out of curiosity, what is the total cost of the roof to replace it?
The roof minimum would be $130,000 to $150,000.
And does that, it doesn't include fixing the sign or the facade?
Absolutely not. That's the roof only. We've had a couple bids come in, and they were around the $130,000 to $150,000 mark. The marquee, that's a whole nother sign, whole nother project on top of that.
You know, one of the things that I've been interested in, and I think Renisha and I talked about this, is I would love for the city to be able to participate in helping Rogers Theater financially. I just don't know if legally we can do it. But I definitely would, if the council doesn't mind me pursuing, at least looking into, see if we can legally do it. I'd like to be able to do that because Rogers Theater is a landmark. It's something that can definitely anchor our downtown. It can, again, it can provide economic development for the downtown area, which we desperately need. And hey, look, if we can, help out by helping out with some needed capital improvement by using economic development money, I'd like to do that if we can legally do it. So just want to pitch that out there, Madam Mayor and Council, if it's okay for me to start pursuing that.
Is there any historical grants or anything like that?
Well, just whatever we can do, I want to see if we can participate because I don't want to see that theater deteriorate any further. And I think we can provide some assistance. And I think it would be a win for both.
Well, one of the things on the facade, if we have to stop 18-wheel trucks from going right, because that's what hits that thing.
It is, and we've taken care of part of that problem. We've extended out the sidewalk, and there are barriers there.
Yeah.
In our projections, there would be redoing the marquee. It would be structuring it a little bit differently, but keeping the integrity of the sign to keep the tradition and the iconic look to it. We've looked at other ways to raise funds. We are in talks with AMC currently to try to show movies again that are currently 10 years or older. We're gung-ho. They're not so quick to pull the trigger, but we are pursuing that. I've spoken with Renisha, trying to work on different grants and things that we can approach and apply for. So we have tried numerous different things, and we're willing to do what it takes to fix that roof, because we do feel it is iconic and such a historical part of downtown Poplar Bluff.
Yeah, I agree.
And the planning and zoning had a recommendation for it to move forward, correct?
I did recommend
Yeah.
approval, yes. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, and I don't know if anyone asked about it. It came up in planning and zoning. At the events where there would be alcohol, there is increased security planned for.
We haven't set anything in place yet, but we have heavily discussed what we would need for security. We've looked at getting bids on several different security firms
I
in
have some
town.
police officers I can provide for a cost.
That'd be fantastic.
Of course, they're not cheap. But you know
If
what?
they're good, it's worth it.
They're the best in the area, I assure you that.
Okay. Did anyone want to move this to the voting session on April 6th?
I'll make a motion to move it to voting
Second.
session.
Motion and a second to move item G to the voting session on April 6th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item H, the city council will review a request from a property owner to install a 45-foot freestanding power per section 405.070 of the Code of Ordinance for the city of Poplar Bluff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is a request that came into the city offices a couple of weeks ago. I spoke with the city clerk, and all radio, television, communications towers require, if they exceed the height limit, they require approval of council. This did not go before planning and zoning. This is a request from a property owner on Carolyn Drive. Ms. Kirby took the information, and the gentleman is in the audience tonight. He's a private individual, his own radio. I spoke to him a couple of times. There doesn't seem to be any issue with the actions he wishes to take, but it does require specific approval of the council. Questions?
What's the minimum height of a?
The maximum height in the residential area that you're allowed to go is 35 feet without special permission of the
Okay.
council. But all towers that are radio, television, and such require approval of the council.
Okay.
You've looked at this location, it's not,
He's actually had a shorter tower there for some time, and he doesn't have the taller one. Obviously, he didn't want to invest in it until he did receive approval, but he has talked to me about it, so I'm familiar with the location, yes.
The weight and displacement of the tower, I mean, if it would go one direction or the other, would it exceed its property line?
Might to the rear. He is in the audience
Okay.
tonight, so we can ask questions
Okay.
of him as
Okay.
well.
You recommend it?
Yes, I had no issues with it. And actually, the gentleman stated that when he put the other radio up, or the other tower up, he put his number out there and said, if anybody has any problems, if I'm interfering with your radio or, anything,
Yeah.
come see me, let me know.
Good, very good.
There you are.
The only question I have is, children like to climb, so how are we going to keep kids off the tower?
I have a 8-foot privacy fence around two sections. I have a 4-foot chain link with a lock gate.
That's good enough, thank you.
And is this for ham operation?
Yes, it
Yeah,
will be.
excellent.
Yep.
Okay.
It's going to be for what?
Ham.
Ham radio.
radio.
Hand radio, that's an old art.
So if the tower fell in any direction, would it exceed your property line?
Yeah, in one direction, yes,
And-
probably.
And then if it did, is there any structure near that line that we'd have to worry about?
Yeah, I have houses on both sides.
Okay,
I'm gonna put, I've got guide wires on the one I
Yeah.
have now. And of course, I'll put 4 guide wires
okay,
on the one, and I will set the bottom section of the tower in at least 2 feet of concrete.
okay,
That will keep it from,
Swaying.
yeah.
okay.
And we would be out there to check, when he's doing that. If he lets us know when it's happening, that we would be on site.
Okay. Very good.
We can call on you in a disaster for communication.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm out there anyway.
How long have you done ham radio?
Basically about 3 months.
Okay.
I haven't really wanted to get into the tower part of it yet because I was under the understanding, of course, I had
Sure.
to come here.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? I'll make a recommendation, move it to the voting session.
Second.
Okay. Motion and second to move item H to the voting session, which will be held on April 6th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Mayor, not to prolong this, but we already have helped Rogers Theater some when we tore the old gas station down. Provided a lot of parking for them.
That's good, yeah. That's good.
That's good to know.
Thank you. Item I, the City Council will review a request to accept the extension of Barron Road.
Just, Madam Mayor, just if you remember, per our development agreement, our reimbursement agreement with Mr. Hillis, that, hey, they built that extension from Barron Road that connects to W Highway. I don't know if it was a highway or I think it's W Highway. It was a W. And they're obviously done. It's ready to go. We've inspected it. Mr. Kirby's looked at it. We like it. So we'd like to retain ownership of the infrastructure.
Make a motion, we move it to the voting session April 6th.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to move item I to the voting session, April 6th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item J, the City Council will review a proposed amendment to ordinance number 7439, authorizing the mayor to execute a first amendment to a supplemental agreement between the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission, Union Pacific Railroad, and the City of Poplar Bluff relative to signalization improvements to the Vine Street Railroad Crossing and the 2nd Street Railroad Crossing.
Pretty self-explanatory, but in case
is.
in case you
It's
had
pretty
any questions.
self-explanatory there. Did anyone have any questions?
Make a
Anyone?
motion to move item J to the voting session.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to move item J to the voting session, which will be held on April 6th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're going to move on to action required items.
Didn't we have to do something with EE?
Huh?
He's an
That's an action
is an
item.
action
Okay.
required
Action
item.
item.
A while ago, we wrote something down. I wrote EE 785.
Yep.
Was it
seven-
missing or
seven-
something?
Yeah, we're about to get to that
Okay.
for the voting.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Bill number 7801, the City Council will take action on an ordinance approving the conditional use permit to allow for a 45-foot freestanding emergency use communications tower in a CX Central Area Commercial Mixed Use Zone.
Make a motion for the first reading.
Second.
Motion and second for first reading of Bill number 7801. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
In ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, granting Southeast Missouri Amateur Radio Association a conditional use permit in a C3 Central Commercial Mixed Use District to construct a 45-foot freestanding emergency communications tower at 400 South Broadway, Poplar Bluff, Missouri.
Move for adoption.
Second reading.
Second.
Oh, I thought.
Yeah. Move for.
We got to do
go
second
ahead.
reading first.
Move for second reading.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading of Bill number 7801. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
In ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, granting Southeast Missouri Amateur Radio Association a conditional use permit in a C3 Central Commercial Mixed Use District to construct a 45-foot freestanding emergency communications tower at 400 South Broadway, Poplar Bluff, Missouri.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Motion and second for adoption of Bill number 7801. Do we have any comments or questions?
This is the one down at the rescue mission, correct?
Yes.
Okay, because we just had two 45-foot towers. I just want to make sure we did the right one.
Roll call.
Councilman DeGaris.
Yes.
Councilwoman Abshir.
Yes.
Councilman Tinsley.
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Russian.
Yes.
Mayor Pearson.
Yes.
We have 6 yes votes.
Okay. Bill number 7802, the City Council will take action on an ordinance creating an accounting manager position and an assistant city manager personnel director position for the City of Poplar Bluff.
Move for first reading.
Second.
Motion and second for first reading of Bill number 7802. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
An ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, creating the positions of accounting manager and assistant city manager / personnel director for the city.
Move for second reading, 7802.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading of Bill number 7802. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
In ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, creating the positions of accounting manager and assistant city manager / personnel director for the city.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Motion and second for adoption of Bill number 7802. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
Councilwoman Abshir.
Yes.
Councilman Tinsley.
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
Councilman DeGaris.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Russian.
Yes.
Mayor Pearson.
Yes.
We have 6 yes votes.
Bill number 7803, the City Council will take action on an ordinance approving a purchasing policy for the City of Poplar Bluff.
Move for first reading of bill number 7803.
Second.
Motion and second for first reading of Bill number 7803. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
In ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, approving a purchasing policy for the city.
Move for second reading.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading of Bill number 7803. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
In ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, approving a purchasing policy for the city.
Move for adoption of bill number 7803.
Second.
Motion and second for adoption of Bill number 7803. Do we have any comments or questions?
Do we need to mention as amended in our workshop?
I think we already
We
amended.
did amend it, so I've got a note to make those
Okay.
as amended. So,
Good? Roll call?
Councilman Tinsley.
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
Councilman DeGaris.
Yes.
Councilwoman Abshir.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Russian.
Yes.
Mayor Pearson.
Yes.
6 yes votes.
Okay. Bill number 7804, the City Council will take action on an ordinance accepting a bid for the financing proposals relative to the city's disaster recovery plan and the 5-year capital plan.
Move first reading.
Second.
Motion and second for first reading of Bill number 7804. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
An ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, accepting a bid for the financing proposals relative to the city's disaster recovery plan and 5-year capital plan for the city.
Motion for second reading of bill 7804.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading of Bill number 7804. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
An ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, accepting a bid for the financing proposals relative to the city's disaster recovery plan and 5-year capital plan for the city.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion and second to adopt. Any comments or questions? Is this the one where the fire, the fire?
Yep. May I comment on that?
Yeah, because it's causing me issues too.
So the investor is the one that brought up the collateral for this debt issuance, and we're working through the issue. They really are pretty stuck on the buildings. Now, keep in mind that the city has never defaulted on debt. It never will. So I'm pretty comfortable with, obviously if they want them as collateral, I'm not going to float debt I can't pay for. So it's not like I'm going to one swoop take out your fire department that quick. The other thing that this is actually pretty neat about is when I talked to Shannon Crichton from Gilmore and Bell this morning about this transaction, is for us to legally be able to use that as collateral, we have to show that we're spending a minimum of 10% of the proceeds towards those 3 buildings. That's a substantial sum of money. And so really, this is helping those 3 fire stations, because otherwise, we were going to be throwing most of our money in just Station 3, and we weren't going to be doing anything in Stations 1 and 2. Well, since we got to use them as collateral and we got that minimum threshold of 10%, then we're going to have to reinvest even more dollars towards Stations 1 and 2 where we normally wouldn't have. So actually, using them as collateral is benefiting Stations 1 and 2. And so, now this is not a done deal after you approve this. This has to still come back after we have the actual agreement in place. So this is far from a done deal. So just because you're approving it tonight does not mean we're done.
Roll call.
Councilman Johnson?
Yes.
Councilman DeGaris?
No.
Councilwoman Abshir?
No.
Councilman Tinsley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Russian?
Yes.
Mayor Pearson?
No.
Does not pass.
Bill number 7805, the City Council will take action on an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a grant agreement relative to home repair opportunity grant agreement.
Move for first reading, bill number 7805.
Second.
Motion and a second for first reading of bill number 7805. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
In ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, authorizing the mayor of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri to execute a grant agreement with the Missouri Housing Development Commission.
Move for second reading. Second.
Motion and a second for second reading of bill number 7805. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
In ordinance of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, authorizing the mayor of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri to execute a grant agreement with the Missouri Housing Development Commission.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion and a second for adoption. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
Councilman DeGaris?
Yes.
Councilwoman Abshir?
Yes.
Councilman Tinsley?
Yes.
Councilman Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Russian?
Yes.
Mayor Pearson?
Yes.
We have 6 yes votes.
Okay. Resolution number 1818, the City Council will take action on a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a community development block grant for funding for housing for families that were affected in the 2011 flood.
Move for first reading.
Second.
Motion is second for first reading of Resolution 1818. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
A resolution authorizing the mayor of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri to execute and submit an application for a community development block grant for funding housing for families that were affected in the 2011 flood.
Move for adoption.
Motion for adoption. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
Councilwoman Abshir?
Yes.
Councilman Tinsley?
Yes.
Councilman Johnson?
Yes.
Councilman DeGaris?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Russian?
Yes.
Mayor Pearson?
Yes.
We have 6 yes votes.
Does anyone want
No closed session.
No closed session.
to, no closed session?
Make a motion to
Shock.
adjourn after the city manager's report.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn after the city manager's report. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
The first point is just a question, is now that, and this might be for Mr. Smith, since Bill 7804 failed, does that mean that basically I stopped doing anything for the capital improvement reimbursement through Commerce Banks? The way I'm interpreting that is that we're just not going to do anything. That means that the $1.5 million we're going to reimburse ourselves for the 911 center, we're just going to take that out of existing cash, which we've already done, and then we're not going to do any capital improvements for the year 2015, 16, or 17.
I would bring that back, in my opinion. The reason why I voted no for it was the same reason they voted no for it, is because that, to me, is too risky, putting our fire departments out there. I'm sorry, I just can't do it.
I'll just have to rebid the whole thing.
Well, the problem is, in
I mean, it's already voted no against.
I know, the problem
Sorry.
is, yeah, I know, the problem is as he stated, which I am very aware of, we've never defaulted. on a loan, not anticipating we're going to default on a loan, because you're dealing with items of technology. It's not uncommon practice to require additional collateral. And I have purchased items in the past where I had to put more up for collateral than the item I purchased. So I was familiar with it. And I realize others might not have been, but we'll have to rebid it.
Yeah, what I might do is just wait, because I bid it once, and the reason why a lot of investors said they wouldn't is I haven't been here long enough yet. So I might wait until my 1-year anniversary, which will be in August, to rebid it. And meanwhile, I think we should just plan on not doing any capital improvements for this fiscal year. And we already adjusted out the $1.5 million out of our cash. So I think we should wait at least until 1-year anniversary to rebid it, which would be in August. And so you're looking at September, October before you'll get a bid. But that's what I'd suggest, because that way, when we go back out for bid, I've been here a year, I can show them a track record of what we've accomplished financially, and then we'll get bids from institutional banks. I don't know if the ones local will bid on or not. I think it's turned political. I don't care if they do or they don't. All I care is I get bids, good bids.
Yeah, sure.
And so, I hope we'll wait until after August is what I'll suggest, and that way we can show people that, hey, look, I've been here a year. But in the meanwhile, the streets that we're trying to pave, that's now on hold. That means the ditch is now on hold. That means that the street sweeper that we needed is on hold. That means that everything that was going to be improved, including Fire Station 3, is now on hold. And so we'll wait until the fall, and we'll see if we get better bids at that time. But in regards to my report, I want to talk about another capital improvement that we're going to need, which is the police department. Everyone knows it's diminishing over time. This ice storm, or ice storms, plural, weren't very kind to the building, to say the least. We were hoping to avoid having to put the police department in a temporary building. I think we cannot avoid that anymore. I think we got to get them out of that building. We already found a place for the 911 center. That's at the Three Rivers Community College. We're looking at 2 sites for the police department, and we're now negotiating the best price we can get. Once I get that, I'll bring it back to the council for approval. But that will be a non-budgeted item, but I don't think we have any choice given the conditions that we have in that police department are just abominable. It stinks. It's unsafe, and we just got to get them into better accommodations until we decide through the feasibility committee of what we're going to do to replace the building or rehab it or whatever we're deciding to do. But I just don't think I can wait any further. I was hoping the building was going to last one more year. I just don't think it's going to. This building will definitely do that, but the police department, I got to get them into a safer working condition. So I just want to make you guys aware that we are contacting a couple of property owners to see if that'll work. Outside of that, the only other item I have is, like we were talking about tonight in regards to the city's financials, there's been a lot of misinformation put out in regards to what actually is the financial condition of the city. I can tell you the financial condition of the city is quite strong. It won't be quite strong if we don't fix our electric utility issue that we discussed tonight, and we don't discuss more in detail about the Black River Coliseum. Those are the 2 items right now as it stands are the biggest pull of cash on your enterprise funds, because even though the BRC is an enterprise fund, it's pulling from general fund reserves. And so I can tell you that we're in good shape. We got a good credit rating. I never thought I'd be in a community where I guess good credit rating doesn't mean much. That people think that the spending with restricted funds, by the way, folks, I've not touched 1 cent of unrestricted cash since I've been here. The only cash I've touched is restricted cash. Now, what does that mean? Is the money, again, that I'm using for capital improvements, it's the half-cent sales tax that's collected and it cannot be used for anything other than capital improvements. That's the only thing that I have leveraged. And somehow that's being translated by the paper and by the community as I am bankrupting the city. Well, I spent $7 million to date of restricted cash through loans, leveraging against $2 million annualized of reoccurring revenues. What's the rate of return on $7 million with $2 million? Well, what is that, 3 years, 3 and some change, 3.2? But somehow that's being misinterpreted. We're talking about this information that's being out there, is that somehow we can't afford things, and why, and in turn, that's why banks locally supposedly won't give us loans. And so it's, we got good interest from our first two ones that I put out, and all of a sudden it stopped. And it stopped coincidentally after I said in a meeting, public meeting as well, if we're in that bad financial shape, why are people giving us loans? Then the paper gets real revved up. And now all of a sudden these local banks are afraid to lend us loans because none of them want their names in the paper. And it is the most odd situation I've ever come across in my public career. And to be honest with you,
Well, one thing to say, to be on track and on point, I had a text sent to me by a local business person, and basically what he said was that when they did the highway, the 4-lane, what they did is they borrowed the money for that project and leveraged it against the taxes they had set for it. And he said in the text, he said, that's no different than what we're doing in the community right now. It's no different.
the school district does it every year.
That's right. This is common practice, but why it's distorted, I don't know, but he made a very good point that he was accurate about, was that that's exactly how we did the 4-lane. That big multi-million-dollar project was done by leveraging money on the taxation, and that's the same thing we're doing here on the capital improvements. Not touching general revenues.
Not touching a dime of it.
Yes.
Not a dime of unrestricted cash, not one dime of it has been touched. Until now, today, now you just touched it for $1.5 million that I didn't, I mean, I was trying to avoid, I was trying to reimburse. And so,
It can't be spent on anything else.
no,
Listen,
and so.
You could bring it back, just change it a little bit. That's all we're asking.
I'm just saying is how effective am I really being as your city manager is really what I'm starting to consider here, is I want to be effective to this community and to this council. And it's get to the point where you got so much misinformation being out there by the paper that people are doubting my leadership and my credentials.
Mr. Kaplan, I don't think that's happening. I don't think that's happening at all. The calls that I had today is small minority. I don't think that's happening. The people that spoke with us today, the two ladies that were here before, you know, we've got, you know, we have so many things we're having to deal with, from the deterioration of City Hall to the drop off of cash on hand, the utilities, to the TIF and TDD.
To the BRC.
These are immense issues. None of them are small, and the TIF is a big one. These are things got to be dealt with, and we will deal with them. So we'll move forward.
And what's going to happen is if it is determined through a feasibility study, we have to replace this building through new construction, we're going to go through a bond process, and guess what they're going to want as collateral, folks? The building. The very building you're going to build. And if you can't accept that now, then we might as well not even go through the process. And I'm not doing this to be like a spoiled brat that I didn't get a lollipop that I wanted because I was tugging on my mom's shirt. I want you to understand that this is common practice to have these items for collateral. The city has great credit. We got strong cash. If you don't believe me, you got an auditor that's sitting right there in the audience, Mr. Conway. They can explain all this to you, or anyone in the public that has any concerns. I'm just tired of the paper determining what is financial sustainability and what's not, when it should be professionals like myself and Mr. Conway are the measuring stick. It's not the paper.
I don't want us to discuss the paper anymore. I want us to do the work. I want every councilman, I want every staff member to do the work.
Can we go back just a minute here? When we brought up the fire stations, we weren't just going to hold one, we're going to hold 3 of them as collateral. Can we not mix? Do you have to hold all of our fire stations? And I understand we've not ever went back. To me, that's just,
That should have been tabled and discussed. That wasn't tabled and discussed.
That's done now.
Should have been tabled and discussed.
But that's okay, it's just, I'm sorry, Mr. Messian.
Well, a lot of you may not know this, but when we did the bonds to build the Coliseum and the golf course and the library, this building, the Coliseum, the library was all put up for collateral with those bonds. So this is nothing new. I mean,
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much.
And I'm sorry if I'm just a little frustrated, but I'm doing what's best practices, and yet I feel like I'm just getting deterred because of smoke screen that's being put up. So I apologize for the frustration.
Well,
I'm not trying to be unprofessional.
We need to adjourn, and thank you, Mark, for your input. Thank you very much.
Before we adjourn, I'd just like, again, thank all the citizens that called, who had a lot of calls. They were concerns. They were very compassionate. They understood, and I said, like I tried to say a while ago, I don't want to raise it, but all of them understood. If that's what we got to do, that's what we've got to do. They just want us to do our due diligence and keep it as low as possible and keep everything going good. And I encouraged them to call me back anytime they got questions. They were very pleasurable to talk to.
Just for your comment, I had a call from a city from Wichita, Kansas, asking about it. It was the son of a mother that lived here, and she called him, and he called me up, and I said, "What's doing from Wichita, Kansas?" Then he explained what was going on, and he was very nice.
I share the same. The only calls I missed was because I was on a call. My phone was ringing, I couldn't. But I have to make some comment that it would have been so much better to have a lengthy, informed article informing the people of what was presented tonight, instead of having a radical scare or something off the cuff that was based on nothing but fear and just what they suspected, and not based on fact at all. It's sad.
Motion to adjourn.
okay.
Second.
It's already been done.
Okay, we've already done it. Thank you.
Do you want to sign this?